worthwhile, needed.
That's correct, Chairman.
North of the London Road. Full planning permission is sought for a park and ride facility comprising 254 car and motorcycle parking spaces, bus stops, bicycle storage, landscaping, drainage, and ancillary development. The site is currently undeveloped open land and bordered by a variety of suburban land uses, including low-rise residential, a public house, woodland, and a BMX track play facility. A public right-of-way is sited immediately to the east of the site boundary, with a noise bund and the A329M motorway further to the east. The site is shown on this slide here in light grey in relation to recently constructed development at Keep Hatch Gardens. Viewpoint 1, that's the orange arrow, shows the already constructed access road when viewed from the western side of Oak Avenue. The road is currently used to access the Catkin House apartments and Oakingham Bell pub car park. The road in junction with Oak Avenue is subject to a highways adoption agreement with the council, and the Highways Authority has ensured already that an appropriate specification for the use proposed has been achieved for this junction. Viewpoint 2, that's the blue arrow, is taken from within the site and in a northerly direction that shows the existing boundary with the parking courtyards of the Burr House and Acorn House apartments situated on Oak Avenue to the rear. Further in the distance, the photograph is the BMX track, that's close to where the trees are, and beyond this, Sadler's Close and residential properties on that street. Viewpoint 3 is taken from the eastern boundary of the site, and that's looking in a westerly direction back towards the residential development along Oak Avenue. As can be seen, the site slopes downwards in that direction. And finally, viewpoint 4, shown here with a green arrow, shows these same Oak Avenue properties, but taken from a vantage point just behind the BMX track. In terms of planning policy, the 2010 Wokingham Core Strategy identifies the need for a park and ride facility in this location in order to provide new and existing communities with the ability to walk, cycle and ride buses into Bracknell and Wokingham. The adopted North Wokingham SDL supplementary planning document further identifies the Keep Hatch Garden site specifically as a preferred location for a park and ride facility. Outline planning permission for Keep Hatch Gardens was granted in 2015 and reserved the land shown here on the left-hand side plan for a park and ride. It also established the principle of development for this use on this part of the site. The Section 106 legal agreement associated with the permission requires the land to be transferred to the council upon request. The reserve matters, which followed in 2017, set out the detail of the residential development and also the Northern Distributor Road, that's Oak Avenue. In accordance with the Section 106, the reserve matters, shown here on the right-hand plan, made that land available for a park and ride, as well as providing suitable access. The detail of the park and ride, however, hasn't come forward until now, and due to the time elapsed since the outline planning permission, a new full planning application is required. So the rationale for the proposal, and really the reason behind a park and ride infrastructure being identified in the council's adopted planning policies, has been to support local housing and employment growth, as well as to reduce congestion and emissions along the wider A329 corridor. As a piece of transport infrastructure, it is anticipated that the facility will encourage a shift to more sustainable modes of travel by providing attractive and viable alternatives to the private car. So the application currently before the committee this evening seeks approval for the site plan shown on this slide. The park and ride facility would comprise 254 car parking spaces, 10 motorcycle spaces, bus stops and shelters, bicycle parking, landscaping, drainage and ancillary development. Electric vehicle charging for 13 spaces would be provided from the outset, with flexibility built in to convert over half the spaces to electric at a later point when needed. The layout has been assessed and is considered to be appropriate and safe, subject to conditions which will control the finer elements of the design and construction specification. Transport modelling has demonstrated that local junctions will operate within capacity. The scheme itself, though, will result in an overall improvement in the capacity on the road network. An environmental appraisal report has considered the impact of the development on air quality and noise during construction and operation, and it demonstrates there would not be a significant impact on neighbouring residents. Subject to the recommended conditions, the application will not have a detrimental impact on ecology, drainage, or archaeology. The main impact of the development on the character of the area would result from the introduction of hard standing across the majority of the site, together with that of parked cars and lighting. Although the site is well screened from the east and south, it will be visible in the outlook from adjacent residential development. These localised impacts can be mitigated in part through soft landscaping and boundary fencing, the details of which can be controlled through the recommended conditions. A preliminary soft landscaping scheme has been produced, and it demonstrates that 85 new trees, approximately 85 new trees, can be accommodated across the site. There are currently no trees on the site, and a number of mature specimens could be introduced along the western boundary adjacent to the parking courtyards for the Oak Avenue apartments I mentioned earlier. So in conclusion, the proposals are considered to be acceptable in accord with relevant planning policy. The application is therefore recommended for approval subject to the conditions set out in the committee report.
Thank you, Nick.
Chairman, it's Callum here. Can I just quickly jump in?
Yes, please.
Just to say, there was a slight audio glitch at the start of this. I just wanted to confirm for the benefit of the stream that, and correct me if I'm wrong, that apologies were Gary Cowan. The minutes were agreed as correct with Councillor Ross abstaining. There were no declarations of interest, and there were no items to be deferred or withdrawn.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Okay, Nick, thank you for that presentation. Could we get our screen back, please, and lose your slides?
Certainly.
Thank you. Okay, thank you for that, Nick. As you know, we are not able to have speakers physically present, but we give opportunities for all the normal categories of external speakers to make a submission, which has been circulated earlier, circulated on Tuesday morning. So people have had some time to view those. Just to confirm that there was no submission submitted by the Town Council. There was no submission submitted by objectors. There was no submission submitted by ward members, and the WBC through its through WSB submitted details in support of this proposal. So without further ado, we'll go to members. Now, you know normally that I work my way through the committee, because we're not physically present, alphabetically for ease, but as is customary, I will actually ask the ward member if he wishes to speak first. And the ward member, of course, here is Malcolm Richards. Malcolm, would you like to speak?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just go through things briefly. I've been aware of this, obviously, for some years since the original application came in 2015. It's a big chunk of land that the developer provided with the intention of becoming a park and ride. And as I understand it, if it isn't a park and ride, then the land would revert to the developer, presumably to do whatever else he wanted with it. So it's quite important that we use it for its purpose. It's a good location for a park and ride. It's a decent size. It's on an existing bus route. So the 4 and the 4X4 from Bracknell that comes through Wokingham towards Reading goes past as well. I believe it's thought that bus might be used there even to go in and have a bus stop in there and come out. So it's in a good location. It's large. It's been intended to be there for some time. The layout looks pretty good. We're not chopping down massive amounts of trees or anything like that. It's a good use. Couple of quick questions. I don't know in terms of how many hours it'll be operating. If it's using the bus service like 4 and 4X, that's presumably from something like 8 o'clock in the morning till 10 o'clock at night. But if somebody comes there and needs to leave the car and not get back till midnight or something, would the lights, do we know what's happening with the lights? Have any hours at all been agreed yet? I don't think they have.
We'll get an answer. Was there another question, Malcolm?
Yes, it's a fairly simple one. Obviously, there's no other buildings there. There may or may not be a payment kiosk, or it could be machines. But if somebody in the evening, when the buses aren't so frequent, if they arrive there and they're waiting for a bus or coach to take them further afield, they could be waiting there half an hour. And if that's in cold weather and so on, I wondered, I know we can't change what's in front of us, I wonder whether we could put in a comment that suggests there could be at least some vending machines that people could buy hot or cold drinks or something like that whilst they're waiting, so that makes it more attractive. Could we put a comment in about that?
Right. Okay. Thank you for that. We'll get some answers to that. Nick, could you confirm that there will be any form of a shelter or places for people to wait for transport? I assume that will be covered under the
bus
part
stops,
of the planning, which is ancillary development. Is that correct?
Yeah, there is scope for minor small outbuildings such as that, and it's certainly intended to cover a toilet block, which we anticipate may come later. There will be bus shelters, so people won't be completely out in the elements. In terms of a shop, I really couldn't speak on behalf of
it wasn't a shop, actually. It was more of a kiosk with vending machines.
I think he suggested a vending machine or something, that dispensed a cold drink or hot drink or something. But that's a detail that we can move on to, I think, after that.
Could you also points? Sorry, because we don't know where the buses will go yet, but or what the arrangement is. But we need the park and ride before we can decide all those things anyway. And I'm in favour of this.
Okay. Could we just answer Malcolm's other question, which related to the lighting? If people returned to a vehicle quite late, what are the proposals for the lighting, particularly with regard to the fact that it is adjacent to the new residential? Although obviously that residential would have known of the park and ride being planned for the location. What's the proposal on lighting hours?
Well, at the moment, as I understand it, there isn't a detailed proposal on the lighting hours. And for that reason, I've recommended a condition for lighting that will, among other things, control the lighting hours. Now, I think later on in the process, once more is known about how the facility will be managed, at that point, we can make a judgment as to what the appropriate lighting hours might be.
All right, thank you. All right, members, I'll now revert to the normal sequence of going around the committee in alphabetical order, one way and then the other. So if I could ask Chris Bowring if he has any questions or comments he wishes to make about this application.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I support this application. I recognise that the outline has expired, but it's a very strong material consideration. It establishes the areas being suitable for a park and ride. I know there have been comments about the efficacy of the scheme itself, whether it's profitable or not. But my understanding is that's not a planning matter, and therefore we shouldn't. If we start talking about that, we're going up a bit of a blind alley. So, as I said, I'm in favour of this application. Thank you.
Thank you. I now come to Stephen Conway.
Thank you, Chairman. I do have some reservations about this application, although I don't think they're reservations that we can take very far. Obviously, it's highly desirable that there be a park and ride associated with the North Wokingham SDL. I think we're all in favour of trying to encourage a movement to public transport and alternatives to the car wherever possible. I question really whether this is the right location for a park and ride to service the North Wokingham SDL. The comment has been made, I think, both by the Town Council in their representations and by another of the ward members, Rachel Burgess, about what real incentives people would have to travel into the centre of Wokingham from this park and ride. And I share those concerns. I also have to say that one of the big impacts of the North Wokingham SDL will be on Twyford Station, where a lot of people will seek to commute from because it's a more effective journey into London than from Wokingham Station. And unfortunately, this park and ride is not really going to cater in any way for that kind of an alternative to that kind of demand to get to Twyford Station by car. And having said all of those things, and I regret that really we're not looking at a different application on a different site, but we're not. So I have to accept that we're looking at what we are looking at. The principle has clearly been established by the outline, and although the reserved matters has lapsed effectively, hence this new application, the principle is clearly established. I hope we are going to be able to provide really strong protections for the residents in the immediate area in terms of landscaping and boundary treatments, because it is undoubtedly going to have an impact on them. So with great reservations and some considerable regret, I think we don't really have much option but to approve this application.
Okay, thank you, Stephen. Carl Duran.
Hi.
Hi, Carl.
Good. Just checking you could hear me. Okay. Yeah, I've got a few questions. About 6 actually, but I'll ask the first 4 altogether because they're kind of all on the same subject. Basically, it's about what buses are going to serve this park and ride. Is there a bus lane on the A329 into Wokingham, or indeed in the other direction off to Bracknell? What will the bus frequency be? And how is the charging for the park and ride and the bus going to work?
Okay. Well, let's get some answers on those. I would think that we are certainly beginning to stray a little out of the realm of the planning application itself. Nick, are you able to address questions about the buses, their frequency, and whether there will be a bus lane along the A329M towards Wokingham Town Centre or Bracknell?
I can't speak in terms of Bracknell. In terms of Wokingham, I'm not aware of any proposal for a bus lane into the town centre, although my colleague Judy would know about it if there were, so I'm sure she can pitch in if need be. In terms of the services, they are the existing services that go to both Bracknell and Wokingham. In terms of the charging, again, I'm not sure. It's not something I've considered for this application because it isn't a planning issue.
Do you want me to jump in?
Yes, if you could, please, Judy.
So the Nick's right. There's not a bus lane into Wokingham at the moment along the A329 London Road. That would, there's no reason why it couldn't be looked at in the future, but there's no proposals that we're aware of at the moment. And the bus frequencies along London Road near the park and ride are sort of up to 4 services an hour at the moment. So that's the 4 and the X4 service that Malcolm mentioned earlier. So there's not really been a decision made on which buses will come into the site and what routing there will be from the park and ride. That's still a decision to be made as with the cost for the parking, I believe.
Okay. Would it be fair to say, Judy, to be blunt, it's a little chicken and egg in terms of bus services, because people's willingness to use the park and ride is going to be dependent largely on the availability and frequency of bus services. And on the other hand, the bus service providers will obviously want to know whether there's actually going to be a demand for their service. So it is a bit chicken and egg, isn't it?
I think so, yes. And the bus services are sort of regularly sort of reviewed and recontracted, every few years. So it really comes down to which bus operators we're ending up with and which services.
Okay, thank you. Carl, you had some other questions?
Yeah, just to go back on that one. You kind of said we're kind of straying away from the planning reasons, but the entire reasoning behind this and the business cases rely on it being sustainable development under the MPPF, which has obviously an economic, a social and an environmental objective. And therefore, it needs to fit those things. And there needs to be evidence that it will do those things. And not having a dedicated bus service causes that a problem, and there is no dedicated bus service. Neither the 2017 nor the 2020 business cases talk about it. The 2020 business case mentions it towards the end as if there's a possibility of it, but there is no dedicated bus service for this. It's effectively a car park that happens to be on a bus route is seemingly what's happening. So I kind of wanted to delve into that because I recognise the point. There's an outline permission, but obviously that's run out, but and I agree with what Chris says about that being a material consideration. It is, but this park and ride should work. If we're going to vote for it, it's going to cost £3 million. So we should spend that money wisely. And so I kind of want to find out those things. And there's lots in the business case. There are answers to the questions I've asked because I don't ask questions I don't know the answers to generally. The idea for the park and ride is that parking is going to cost £1. And the bus will be charged extra because obviously it's a Reading Buses service that just goes past. So you've got to make it attractive to people to go in, and I'm not sure that does. The bus frequency is 4 at peak hours, but that stops at 9 a.m. So after that, it's 3 times, sometimes 2 times a day. I'm just making the point that this is meant to be attractive. There is no bus lane, nor is there any idea of one. And the point I'd like to make is, you're trying to make this attractive to people to come and use. And if I'm just got off the A329M and I'm driving into Wokingham and I'm thinking, right, am I going to use the park and ride, or am I going to carry on driving to Wokingham to use one of the extra 130 spaces at Denmark Street, which aren't mentioned in the business case at all because no one factored that in. So we've got lots of extra parking in Wokingham town now. And what am I going to do? Am I going to sit in this queue here that's a bit congested getting in on London Road? Or am I going to go and park my car, pay park and ride £1, get my money for the bus, get on a bus, which I might have had to wait at least 15, 20 or 30 minutes for, and get in the same queue that I was just in, but a bit further back? And I just don't see how that's attractive in any way. Perhaps at some point a dedicated service will come on, but from what the business case says, that doesn't sound like it's going to happen. I believe even diverting the X4 and 4 service seems to be a bit of a problem for Reading buses, because they want extra money because they think the delay of throwing the bus around the park and ride means they need an extra bus on the service. And I believe WC balked at the cost of that. So, we're a long way from even getting them to route the bus in.
Carl, I'm going to have to ask you to come to your other questions, please.
Could I just make a point on that? Sorry, I should have mentioned earlier, we do have a sum of Section 106 money specifically for public transport services for the North Wokingham SDL. So that money is sitting in our coffers or coming in sort of as we speak. And there is a review of the bus services and how best to spend that money due. Obviously, with the COVID situation, the public transport team do have their hands slightly full at the moment. But I just to say that, don't rule anything out at this stage.
Absolutely. I think my argument to that, I'll come to the question in a moment, but my argument to that point is that this isn't for the people of the North Wokingham SDL. The bus is already there. It already exists. So, they aren't going to be parking, unless they're going to be driving 400 yards to park in a park and ride to get a bus into Woking, when they could just walk to that bus stop or go into Woking by a different route. It makes no sense. But anyway, let me get to other questions. The whole point of the park and ride is to reduce congestion. So I'd like to know where that's evidenced in the plans. I've read the transport statement and the planning statement and both business cases, the 2017 version and 2020 version, and I can't see any evidence that will happen.
Okay. I'll invite Judy, or is it Nick who's going to respond to
that? I'm not completely up to speed on the business case. I don't know how good you are, Nick, on it. I think the main point really is just that the park and ride, using the strategic transport model, we're able to sort of predict how much traffic is going to be attracted to it, and therefore, how much would be taken off London Road that otherwise might go towards Wokingham Town Centre or Bracknell Town Centre. But I couldn't sort of comment in detail on the business case. I don't have that in front of me.
I mean, I think. Yeah. Sorry, Simon. I'm Simon Connor. I'm just jumping in. I think one of the things to also remind everybody is it does serve Wokingham, but it also serves Bracknell, and potentially in the future it will serve Twyford as well. So it's about providing that opportunity, and it is left funded as well, most of it. So it's about providing that opportunity for a bus service to come in, for dedicated bus service potentially in the future, and hopefully that will by having it there in its place, it'll give the opportunity for potentially a designated bus lane, but also designated bus services to that. And that will obviously help with costs as well, but that's not a planning issue. So it's not just serving Wokingham. I think that's something we need to bear in mind.
Presume, so of course some people will be using it to transit through Wokingham on towards Reading, where it would provide, leaving their car this side of Wokingham would reduce congestion further on towards Reading.
Yes.
Okay, right. Carl?
Yeah, sorry, I'm chuckling at that. I can't see how the business case used Winnersh Park and Ride to extrapolate the figures for the number of cars in and out that will be used by this, and it's a completely different scenario. It's a train station car park for a start, and the park and ride is a dedicated bus up to Reading, not into Wokingham. I can't imagine anyone driving northbound on the A329M is going to think, oh, I will go to the Keepatch Beach Park and Ride to get into Reading. I mean, that's ludicrous. I mean, no one's going to do that. That's just silly, really. But I won't go on the point, but I don't think there's any reason for this park and ride to exist, unfortunately. Right. Just the other thing I just want to mention is the 2020 business case kind of refers to the fact that it satisfies the MPPF objectives. And it says the park and ride will encourage trips between the housing development at Keepatch Beach and other residential areas within Woking and Bracknell Town Centre, as well as providing links to Reading Town Centre, which it won't. And it's false because the bus service that does that already exists. And no one's going to use this park and ride to access Reading anyway. The social objective says that A new high-quality built environment has been provided at Keepatch Beach, which will be connected to other economic hubs via the park and ride. Again, the bus service is already there and does the connection. And the environmental objective. It talks about removing people to alternate modes of transport to private car, which is great, but I can't see, as I've explained, how it would do that. The alternative of the bus is already there. I think it's going to take a few cars off the road, but I don't think it's going to be attractive. I think this is going to be another white elephant park and ride like Broken Bow.
Okay.
I just don't think it satisfies the MPPF objectives, and so I'll be opposing it.
Okay, thank you, Carl. We can now move on to Pauline Jorgensen. Pauline, obviously, this is an area that you would know a lot about.
I know a fair amount about it. I think I'll try and stick to planning. Yep. Although I would say to Carl that comparing it to Winnish Park and Ride and saying that people are less likely to use this for going into Reading than Winnish Park and Ride really doesn't make any sense, because Winnish Triangle has a station where if I'm parking there, I get on the train to go to Reading. I certainly don't use the bus. With here, you've got no station anywhere or within a reasonable distance. So therefore, I think it's actually probably more likely to be used as a park and ride than Winnish Triangle. And Winnish Triangle is very popular. But take that aside, the bus routes and the pricing have not been agreed. I was focusing very much on the impact on local residents and on the potential impact on the ancient woodland that is around that the development. I've gone through the environmental protection and the protection of the ancient woodland and also the landscaping in some detail this morning, and I'm reassured that they're going to put as much landscaping in as they can in order to protect both local residents and to importantly protect the ancient woodland that sides onto the A329M. So I'm happy with that and happy with the protection they've been doing, and I would hope in the future we will get bus services to places apart from Wokingham from this park and ride. I'd also finally point out that if the land for the park and ride is being donated or handed over by the developer, donated is not the right word, and the vast majority of the funding for this comes from the local enterprise partnership, who have evaluated the business case as well, because they don't give anybody any money without evaluating the likelihood of it being used, and have concluded that this is a good business case for building a park and ride in this area. So I presume that should give some satisfaction that actually it should be a good place to put a park and ride. The remainder of the funding comes from Section 106, and that's really all I wanted to say.
Okay, thank you, Pauline. So no questions to get answered there. Can I now come to Abdul Lois? Good evening. Hello, Abdul, are you able to join us?
Yes, good evening, Chair.
Good evening.
Hi, I think this application have three advantages, which is one is less housing in this area because this place could turn into a house, and two, congestion, and three is less air pollution, people who our neighbors who's living in this area. So I reckon, it's a very good case to put this park and ride here. And as some of you had mentioned that who's going to use it. Once you build it, you will see there's lots of people are using, more houses are developing, more people are moving into Wokingham Borough. So therefore, I will support this application. However, I have one question for Nick. Since 2015, has there been any major change in this major SDL application?
I'll take that. No, the outline planning permission, as you say, was granted in 2015. And yes. What's happened since then is simply that we've approved the reserved matters, which is the detailed layout for the site. And that layout complied with all of the parameters that were established in the outline permission. So essentially, it's been a continuation of what was expected at that outline stage.
Thank you, Nick. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Abdul. Nick, whilst you're there, could we just get clarity that the reason it expired presumably was that the build-out rate was slower than we expected, as we've seen across quite a lot of the developments due to economic uncertainty. Is that correct?
No, that's not quite right. Essentially, the reason it's expired is the outline permission put a time limit on how for when reserved matters would need to come forward by. Had this application been submitted a year and a half ago, it would have been a reserved matters application rather than a full application. But because that 2-year time limit has expired since the outline was granted, we need to have a full application, just procedurally speaking.
Thank you for that. If I can now come to Andrew Mickelbrook. Good evening, Andrew.
Good evening, Chair. Thank you. I support park and ride schemes, and I acknowledge the support for this proposal offered by the ward member. However, I am concerned that the photos shown tonight suggest that this project appears to be much closer to a very large number of residential dwellings of moderate to high density than other park and ride schemes in our borough. I note that the 27 screening matrix, item 10.1, refers to impacts on existing land uses, including housing. Can we have assurances that the impact on nearby houses that's existing as well as future has been given a very high weighting, an appropriate weighting in this screening? Secondly, item 12 in the screening matrix specifically requires consideration of cumulative effects. It may well be that individually most, even all of the effects may not be significant, but the whole is often much greater than the sum of its parts. It must be technically very complex calculating such cumulative effects. Can we please have assurances that the cumulative effects have been quantified in a manner that would pass independent, rigorous scrutiny? Thirdly, I accept the need to be pragmatic in terms of the level of detail included on many matters in a planning application such as this. For example, condition 10 refers to lighting, with an external lighting scheme to be submitted to the LPA. My concern, borne out by worries that early town councillors had in relation to the Broken Brow Park and Ride, is that we're being asked to approve many really important matters for which the fine detail will only come at a later date. Unfortunately, the devil is often in the detail. Is there any facility by which residents and other stakeholders, including councillors, can ask for some of the detailed schemes to be made publicly available and commented upon before they're finally approved, to help improve further some of the project outcomes? And if so, how would this work in relation to the specific application? And finally, I do have some sympathy for Carl's comments about the business case, though I note Pauline's comments in relation to the LEP evaluation of the business case. Could the chair just clarify whether the business case is a material planning consideration in this instance? Thank you very much.
Okay. Okay. Bear with me a minute. Right. Thank you, Andrew. We have several questions here. Firstly, could the officers comment on the assessment of the impact on both existing and future residential in the vicinity of the park and ride? We'll take these one at a time. Nick.
Can I just clarify in terms of the screening matrix that was referred to? Is this the what was in the screening for whether the application was required an environmental impact assessment?
That's correct.
Right. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
So that screening process was undertaken by the LPA prior to the application being submitted, and prior to actually seeing the detailed layout of the site. That was to establish whether or not an environmental statement would be required. But in terms of what's come in through the planning application, I've obviously assessed that as a professional officer and considered, just as I did with the screening matrix, whether or not the impact would be significant. And the conclusion I've reached is that the impact on neighbouring development wouldn't be significantly harmful, such that would warrant refusal.
Okay.
Right. So just to continue with the questions that were raised, the lighting condition, for example, and the question of the finer details of the scheme being dealt with through conditions. Well, this is quite normal for planning applications of this type, that we would look at the details later. My colleagues within the local planning authority who are experts in their field, the idea would be that they would assess these detailed applications, and if they weren't acceptable, of course we would go back and seek to ensure that they became acceptable. It wouldn't normally be the case that that would be put out to wider public consultation. And I think there was a question for Simon about the business case and whether it's relevant to this application.
Yeah, if I could just get clarity, Andrew. Are you asking whether the assessment done by the LEP is a material planning consideration?
Not necessarily the LEP, but just the business case in its entirety.
No, in that case, Mary, as Borough Solicitor, I would just ask you to confirm my interpretation of this, that, as I said as part of the introduction, and I do at the start of all planning committees, our role is to look at things purely from a planning perspective, not from in terms of their financial viability, suitability, whether there's a demand for it or so on. Mary, are you able, as Borough Solicitor, to confirm that, please?
Yes, I can confirm that, Councillor Weeks.
Thank you. Okay, thank you very much. So, Andrew, does that address your points?
Yeah, I did raise a question about screening of the cumulative impacts, but I'm prepared to let that lie unless someone would like to comment on it.
Okay, thank you. I'll now come on to Angus Ross. Good evening, Angus.
Good evening, Chairman. Thank you very much. Yes, I'm looking at this as a reserved matter on the business case not being part of what we have in front of us. We've still got just 4 quick questions or observations. First, I'm very pleased to see the proposals for tree planting. And I think too many comparisons with Winnersh probably don't really apply. I'm very surprised that Pauline takes the train. I always take the bus from there and find it very good. But the second point is I'm a little unsure about whether by this and by the Section 106, and I don't know whether that's been signed or not yet, the land does fall to Woking Borough Council, and whether there's any restriction should the park and ride fail, that then the borough has the use of that land rather than the developer. The third point is just a very simple one. We mentioned about CCTV. I presume this is recorded CCTV, not live CCTV that somebody's looking at all the time, but just clarity on that. And lastly, we talked a bit about hours of operation earlier on and the proximity of the housing. Is there not a case for saying, ahead of any decision about whether it's going to be locked up or not, that this should only operate over certain hours, because buses may change their timing in future? Is this not the time where we should say it operates from X hours in the morning till, let's say, 10 or 11 or sometime in the evening? Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Nick, could we get some clarification then on the issues about the transfer of the land and the what the Borough Council could do with that land once it's transferred, other than have it as a park and ride? Whether the CCTV proposed would be live monitored or simply recorded, and the Angus's quite valid point about operational hours. But we need to recall, members, in all of this, of course, that the proposed park and ride has always been part of this North Wokingham scheme, and I'm therefore assuming that people who were buying properties adjacent to the new properties adjacent to the park and ride would have been aware of other types of a development that are occurring in the vicinity as part of the overall plan. So, Nick, could you attempt to answer those points, please?
Yes. Firstly, on the Section 106, it is very much conditional, the transfer of land to Working Borough Council, and it's quite clear that it can only come to the council if it is to be for a park and ride. If this isn't developed as a park and ride, it's quite simple. The developer will simply keep the land.
Okay. Does that give you reassurance, Angus?
It gives me understanding.
Okay. Carry on.
Okay. And in terms of CCTV, I don't believe that the detail is there yet in terms of whether it be recorded or live, or at least I'm not aware of what the answer is. The detail of the CCTV, though, is a matter controlled by condition, and I would expect that sort of detail to be presented at that stage. In terms of the hours of operation, having said earlier I wasn't sure on when that would be, as I understand it, there is provisionally that the thought is that the park and ride would operate 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. But I thought it was sensible that the condition requiring the parking management scheme would actually control the hours of operation, and that might, for example, provide a bit of flexibility for certain things to happen after 7 p.m. For example, if a car got left there, maybe they could call someone and have the car taken away, get their car back after 7 p.m. Something along those lines, so that it wasn't sort of a rigid hours per se. A parking management scheme just allows a bit more nuance and control over the nature of what happens and at what time.
Could I come back on that, Chairman?
Please.
It would seem to me that if the normal expected hours are from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m, that would serve as a very disincentive for people to use it. And I would suggest whatever actual operating hours are applied by Reading Buses or Working Borough Council or whoever, that as a planning one, and I would propose that from the planning perspective, the hours of operation should be 7 a.m. to 11 p.m.
I must admit, when I heard to 7 p.m, I thought, well, considering many people's working practices of starting later or starting earlier, the working day is quite extended compared with in normal circumstances, the working day is quite extended for some people, either starting very early or finishing very late. Nick, would you like to sort of consider whether we should actually be making a recommendation as a committee, so that when the parking management plan is actually finalised, that it is appropriate?
If you're concerned about the hours of operation, then it could be that the parking management scheme, we could consult yourself, Simon, as chair of the planning committee, to approve the nature of the parking management scheme, including the working hours.
But at the moment, we're not being asked to approve any hours, are we? And
No.
that is the reservation. I suspect people viewing this planning committee will be considering it from two perspectives. Some that the hours should be constrained, and others that they need to be more generous than the hours you spoke about.
Could I just add, sorry, the parking management condition does require ongoing monitoring because the use and the take-up, the popularity of the park and ride could well change over time. And I know certainly in Oxford, which has 4 or 5 park and rides, there's different durations of how long you can stay at them depending on which one it is, because of, in certain ones people drive there to catch the bus to Heathrow to go away on holiday for 2 weeks because it's cheap parking. Other ones, right. So there's, it will, there is a monitoring clause, and we can have that sort of looked at over quite a period of time.
All right. I understand that several hands went up. I'm afraid I can't see who they were now, but could those people? Firstly, I think I saw Andrew Mickelbrook's hand go up. Anyway, Andrew, did you have a comment on that?
Simon. Yeah, sorry, I think Pauline first.
We'll go to Andrew first and Pauline, and then I think there's 2 others after that.
Okay, I think it's an excellent suggestion that the parking management scheme be presented to the chair for his approval. I would like to ask whether we could also add the lighting management scheme to that as well, because I think that will be critical. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Pauline?
Yeah, I'd be happy with that as well. I think I share your reservations. Park and ride that stop working at 7 o'clock are not very good if you're trying to get anywhere which is a distance away. I'm also wondering if people will use this park and ride as an alternative to Woking train station parking and actually use it then to get the train somewhere. And therefore, limiting the hours to 7 would really constrain the ability to do that. So, yeah, I'd be very happy with both recommendations.
Okay. Who else was indicating, please?
I was.
Stephen.
Stephen, go ahead. Stephen, were you indicating?
Can you hear me?
We can now.
Can you hear me?
Now,
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, sorry, I was indicating, yes. I just wanted to say that I completely approve the idea that this should be referred to you, this report should be referred to you, and you should approve it both for the lighting and for the hours of operation. When it comes to the hours of operation, which is obviously connected with the lighting, I completely take the point that 7 p.m. is too early. It really will make this very ineffective. But I do think we need to strike a balance between the two perspectives that you yourself, Simon, have already mentioned. The local residents, who will be obviously keen to constrain the hours as much as possible, and the users will want those hours as generous as possible. So can I just ask that you're mindful of the fact that there are residential properties very close, and that we do need to also bear that in mind. Thank you.
Angus?
Chairman, if I can just come back, I think we're mixing up two things here. Firstly is the protection of the area, which is why I suggested the hours of 7 till 11, because as I see it, there's no condition currently in this application defining hours of operation. And within that, if it's agreed for planning purposes, any other hours within that can be agreed as the operation plan. So I don't know if anybody would wish to second my proposal, but I believe there should be some condition here clearly stating in planning terms the hours in the future that this could operate. Of course, if there was a reason to change that, then they can come back for a change.
Okay, so just to be clear, I think what your proposal is that there are parameters of 7 a.m. to 11 p.m. as being absolute, and anything, obviously it may well be that the operating hours are not as late as 11 o'clock, but that if there was a requirement for them to be after 11 o'clock, that would need a modification of the condition through planning. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly, Chairman.
Okay, well, I'm happy to support that. Before we just go to that, was there anybody else who wished to speak on this?
Yes, I do, please, Chairman.
Malcolm?
Yes.
Go ahead.
I think a 7 till 7 would be a pointless one. It wouldn't use much at all. People do work quite long hours. They quite often park their car somewhere and go off for the day and come back on a later train or joint car service. So it needs to be fairly long hours, but I agree it needs to have boundaries. One of the examples I wanted to give that I'm aware of from previous years is that in my company there would be 3 or 4 people living within, say, a 20-mile radius of the office who would all need to go together, let's say, to Bristol or Birmingham, and rather than 4 cars all driving up the motorways through Wokingham, wherever, they would all go to the same place. All 4 would drive to the equivalent of a park and ride, and then all 4 motorists would get into 1 car and drive. So you had 1 car going through the borough instead of 4. That's a very good saving on pollution and emissions and everything. That could apply here. So it needs to have longer hours because of the time they might get back. It still needs to be controlled, and I think a management plan is good, but 7 to 7 is ridiculous. Maybe 6 till midnight might be a better one. And to recognise, because one of the things I read in the book, somebody was saying, if you make this thing accessible, lots of people will use it. And surely we ought to make sure it's only for the residents residents, not people outside the borough. That, I think, is a foolish comment, because if people are coming from elsewhere, whether it's Bracknell or Camberley or anywhere, they need, if they cross the boundary into our area, they're going to go through our roads. So if we can provide a way of them parking on the edge and using a better, more sustainable transport, that's got to be to our advantage. It's not just for the residents, it's for the borough as a whole.
Thank you. Was there anyone else? Well, we'll see whether Angus wants to modify his proposal in a minute. But before we come to anyone else wishing to speak on this, we have now spent an hour on this one, so we need to make some progress. Anyone else wishing to speak?
I'd actually like to give my chance to speak before everybody else goes put in.
We're doing two things here. There's still Rochelle, we've still got to get to you, and actually you've still got to get to me, because alphabetically I appear after you. So we haven't forgotten you, but the point we're talking about here is the issue that has been proposed and seconded by Angus, and now we're hearing from Malcolm a suggestion that the hours would be extended even further. So Angus, did you want to modify your proposal before we put that to the vote?
No, Chairman.
Okay.
May I comment, please, Mr. Chairman, on the proposal?
Yes, Chris. Bear in mind, I can't see who's raising their hand here.
Oh, okay. I thought you could. Well, I don't quite understand why we are worrying about hours of operation here. Why can't it be 24 hours a day? What's the planning consideration? I mean, when you stop building works from operating 6 in the morning, that's because it affects local residents. As far as planning is concerned, if the park and ride is open for 24 hours a day, what is the problem? I think we're dealing with something which is not a planning matter. Leave it to other people to decide.
Okay, but Chris, you would agree that on many applications, we do apply operational hours that affect the long running, the actual use of the site, not just the construction period. So it is a relevant issue. I think what I'm going to do at this stage is, I'm conscious of the fact that Angus has made a proposal. Angus, would you mind if we heard what Rochelle had to say on this before we do your proposal?
You're the chairman.
Yeah, okay, Rochelle, we'll hear from you now.
I think a lot of these things that we're discussing so far are not planning considerations. First of all, the time of operation will be run by the parking management scheme, which will be run by the borough. And if it's not being used, it'll be torn down. If people are wanting to use it, it'll be increased. So anything that we say at this point is going to be irrelevant. Second of all, on the original application, we were told that if it wasn't a park and ride, it would be made into houses. It's not going to Woking Borough Council. That was in the outline planning application whenever we did that one. So a lot of the complaints about, I want to keep it as a green space doesn't make any sense. I think a lot of the things we are considering at this point has nothing to do with planning. There are all sorts of proposals for new bus services to Twyford, to Reading, to Winnish, to every place but, South Yorkshire, for all I know at this point. And even that's not relevant to do what we're doing. We're looking at a planning application for a park and ride lot. That's the only thing we're looking at. We're not looking at all these other things. They may be material, they may be important to people, but they're not a planning consideration.
Okay. Thank you, Rochelle. So I think that's all the people who wanted to speak. Judy, could I ask you for a view on restricting hours of the park and ride, and what impact that might have?
I mean, I think it really comes down to how it's going to be used and who's going to use it. If it's, I think, as many people have said, if people are going a bit further afield, like catching the bus into the train station, and then getting the bus from Reading on to London, maybe even staying overnight in London and then coming back, if that makes sense to them from a sustainable transport point of view, that's really a good thing to have those cars taken off the road. And one thing we haven't really touched on as well is that the North Wokingham Distributor Road, which goes all the way from Reading Road to London Road, does include 3-metre wide, ped cycle routes on both sides of the road and bus stops all the way along it. So, there's a clear kind of draw there for all these 1,500, new homes in North Wokingham for people to, sustainably access the park and ride to catch buses elsewhere. So I think it's a bit of a difficult one to put to say really before who's going to use it and how that sort of changes over time.
Okay, thank you.
Simon, sorry, Simon.
Sorry.
I was just going to add. I mean, from my point of view, I think it's reasonable for a park and ride generally to operate between the hours of about 6:30 a.m. to about 11 o'clock at night. That's an expected time. In the middle of the night, there is potential antisocial issues, so that it could be looked at in terms of gating. But in terms of Angus's suggestion, I think it's completely reasonable, and also what Rachel said as well.
Can I speak on this, please?
Yes, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to make the point that there are a lot of objectors around problems with noise and air quality in the area, and I think they're going to be horrified to find that now the hours are looking to be extended further than what was written in the planning report and the planning documents. And I get the impression there's a thought here that the really close nearby residents, which are mostly kind of social housing, are in the cheap seats, so no one's that bothered that they've got this park and ride in their faces. And I think the residents, I know there's talk of you having an input into this to deciding this, but I would like the residents to have some input into deciding this to see what they want, because those nearby residents will have to live with it, so they deserve a say before Dominic Cummings takes all our says away.
Yeah, okay, can we leave the politics out of it, please, Carl?
Never.
Okay, thank you. Right, Angus, so just finally, your proposal, could you just confirm whether you want to make it 6 or 7 until 11?
I heard what Connor Corrigan said at 6:30, and I'd be quite happy to make that. I think it is for the amenity or the safety of the amenity of people. And what Carl Doran says, whatever might be in the report, there is no condition which would be left behind if we didn't put in this. So if you're happy to second, I'd say 6:30 to 11.
Okay, so by putting this in, we're actually introducing a clearer set of conditions.
Correct.
All right. Would somebody like to second Angus's suggestion?
I'll second.
Okay.
Okay, fine. That's seconded. Thank you, Abdul. In that case, we'll put that suggestion to the vote.
Simon, not Abdul.
Oh, sorry. Apologies, Pauline.
Okay.
We'll put that to the vote. I will just quickly go round very quickly, asking whether each of you accept this, because it's not reliable using the hands process. Chris, do you accept Angus's proposal?
No.
No.
Vote against. Vote against, yes.
Okay, thank you. Stephen Conway?
No, I don't support it either.
Okay. Carl, I know your answer.
Yeah, I'm against that.
Okay. Pauline Jorgensen?
Well, I seconded it. So I'm sorry.
Yep, okay. Abdul?
Yes, I support that.
Andrew Mickelbrook?
Against.
Against. Malcolm Richards?
I'm against.
Against. Rochelle?
Against.
Okay. So I'm afraid that is lost. We therefore we have a proposal in front of us which doesn't contain specific hours, and being that a proposal to constrain those hours has been defeated, we will have to go now straight to the vote. So members, so just to be very clear, there is not a constraint on hours. That is something that will be determined when the parking management policy is undertaken. Before we come to that, is it the committee's wish that the parking management policy should be reviewed by whoever happens to be the chairman of the planning committee, whenever that may be?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And the local member?
Yes. I do.
Well, there are multiple local members, so I'm not always sure that works. I'm happy to include both. Are there 2 local members? Yes, 2 local members in that ward. I'm happy to include chairman and 2 local members if that's what people wish.
3 local members in that ward.
Who was it 3?
Yeah. Oh, I know they might be a different party.
Who are they?
Rachel.
And Chair, could we also add the lighting scheme as well, please?
What?
Well, that will be as part of the parking management strategy, you mean? Yes, that was understood earlier, that we talked about the operational hours and the lighting scheme, which the 2 will need to be the two will have to be interlinked. Okay.
Thank you.
So, all we'll have to decide now, then, members, is this going to be referred to the chairman of planning committee, or is it going to be referred to the chairman of planning committee and all 3 local members? Any indications there?
Member seems decent. Yeah.
I would say to the chairman of the committee.
Okay. Other people's views?
I would suggest
the board, like an influence.
I would suggest that we ought to include the local members as well as the chair.
Agreed.
Okay. All right, that seems to be getting broad support. So, just to summarise now, you've seen the members' update. We've had over an hour's debate on this subject. We've had a defeat of a proposal to introduce some finite limit of operating hours. So we're going to the main substance of it, and the only variation to the officer's report is that the parking management strategy, which will include hours of operation and lighting, will need to be brought back for consultation with the chairman of the planning committee and the 3 Norris ward members. So members, on that basis, I would just now go around and call each of you by name, get your confirmation whether you wish to support as it stands, and as I've just outlined. Chris Bowring.
Approve.
Stephen Conway.
With some reservations, approve.
Carl Duran.
I do not support this one.
Okay, thank you. Pauline Jorgensen.
Approve.
Okay. Abdul Lois.
Approved.
Andrew Mickelbrook.
Approve.
Angus Ross.
Approve.
Rachel Shepherd-Debay.
Approve, only because there's no planning reasons to
You haven't asked me
approve
yet.
it.
All right.
You haven't asked me yet, Simon.
Sorry?
You haven't asked me whether I approve or not.
My apologies.
I'm just before Angus Ross in the list.
Yes.
I approve.
Yes, thank you. I just skipped over you. Okay. So just to confirm, there are 10 members of the planning committee present, and I'm voting in support of it as well. So it's been supported by 9 members. Carl, do you wish to be recorded as an abstention or against?
Against, please.
Okay, thank you. Right, Callum, got all that?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much, members. If we now move on to planning application 200378. This is Dinton Pastures. It's not the main Dinton Pastures building, it's the activity centre, which is further on close to Sandford Lane, for those of you that are familiar with Dinton. And we go over to the planning officer, Stefan Budger. Thank you, Stefan. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Let me just get the presentation rolling. Can everyone see that?
I can.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yes.
So yeah, this is application 200378, which is for the erection of a new activity centre, activity hall, changing facilities, classroom facility, ancillary offices and cafe, landscaping and parking, following the demolition of the existing activity centre at Dinton Pastures. This is the location plan. So can you see my cursor if I hover it?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So this is the site location plan at the northern end of Dinton Pastures, adjacent Sandford Lane. This is the main car park down the bottom, which is accessed off Davis Street. Just for the context, just for context there. This is an aerial photograph of the existing site. The access is here off Sandford Lane, and the existing activity centre is here, along with boat storage, etc., along the lake. This is the proposed block plan. I hope you can see it clearly. It's a very high resolution plan, so I'm hoping it's clear enough for you to see. The the activity centre would consist of 2 buildings with terraces at both the ground and the first floor, as you'll see in a moment. This is the larger of the 2 buildings, and this is the smaller, which consists of a double height hall. This area just here, that is the lower terrace on the ground floor adjacent to the buildings. The existing building, if you can see it, is dashed in red here, so it's a slightly different location. And there's a fenced storage area adjacent as well, which consolidates a number of storage units which are currently on the site. The car park would remain largely the same, except for a new piece of car park, which is in the middle here. But other than that, it utilises the existing car park to provide some additional spaces. This is the existing building. I'm sure most of you are aware of what it looks like, but it's a simple pitch roof building, single-story pitch roof building at the moment, and these are the existing floor plans. This is the proposed west elevation facing the lake. Apologies again, it's a very high resolution plan, so I hope you can see it clearly. So you can see the larger of the 2 buildings here with the lower terrace, and then the upper terrace here with the railing, and then the smaller of the 2 buildings, which is the hall here and the storage area to the side. This is the east elevation facing the car park. Again, you've got the larger building here and the smaller one here, and the terrace, the upper terrace there linking the 2. This is the proposed south elevation. And this is the proposed north elevation with a staircase coming down. These are the proposed floor plans. So this is the ground floor plan. This is the hall here. This is the storage area, outside storage area, and this is the ground floor plan with the changing facilities, etc. And this is that terrace that I pointed out earlier. This is the proposed first floor plan with the classroom, cafe, the void of the hall because it's double height, toilets, and then this is the upper terrace which also serves the cafe. So just to point out, I just wanted to point out here as clearly as possible the changes to the car parking area. The only area of landscaping and trees to be lost is this small area here to consolidate this area of car park and provide some additional spaces. So in terms of photos of the site, this top photo here is the entrance to the site. The bottom photo is this is towards the landscaping in the car park, which would be removed. These next photos, so this again is of the car park from this location, and this photo is from the old golf course, which is no longer functioning, towards the climbing wall, which is placed here towards the south of the site. This is the existing storage area to the north of the site, and this is the northern side of the existing building. This is the existing boat storage area, which runs along the Embrook to the north of the site, and this is the existing side elevation of the building facing the Embrook and facing the lake. So that's the most visible part of the building as present. These photos are taken from the landscape and visual impact assessment which the applicant submitted. They are a little bit small, I apologise, but it just shows the distance views of the site. So this is from the south towards the main part of Dinton, and this is from outside the site on Davis Way, showing that it is largely screened. This is from the side of the lake towards the site. And this is probably where, this bottom photo is probably where the building would be most visible, which is from the opposite side of the lake. And then last two photos, this photo is, top one is from in front of the centre looking out onto the lake in the opposite direction of the previous photo. And there's another photo from the side of the lake, southwards and eastwards towards the site. So the reasons for recommendation revolve around the fact that the proposal would deliver an enhanced community facility and is therefore acceptable in principle. The proposal would not result in significant harm to the character of the area or to neighbouring amenities. Ecological and flooding issues have been resolved and objections from the EA have been withdrawn. I just wanted to address the issue of parking on surrounding roads, which Chair has mentioned previously, as this has been raised by neighbours. The number of parking spaces provided is in accordance with the borough standards. However, a parking management strategy is required by Condition 12, and this would address how the car park would be managed to prevent parking on surrounding roads. In terms of members' updates, a plan was omitted from the approved details condition, and this has been added. The condition relating to potential ground gas migration, number 14, has been updated to refer to a new report which was received. Different informatives have been recommended following an updated response from Thames Water, and also to provide greater flexibility, the operating hours have been extended. The operating hours condition has been extended to run from 8:30 a.m. to 11 p.m. instead of 9 a.m. from 11 p.m. In the report, in paragraph 49, there is an error in the square footage of the scheme, which is in the update. Additionally, the report doesn't refer to the number of jobs created, which would be 3 permanent roles, along with other temporary summer roles. Chairman also asked me to update you on the difference in footprint between the existing building and the proposed building. This isn't on the members' update, but I have it here for you. The existing building has a footprint, bear in mind it's single story, of 326 square metres. The proposed building and outside storage area, so that includes the outside storage area, have a footprint of just over 1,000 square metres, but not including the outside terrace that drops to 803 square metres. Thank you, Chair.
Right.
I will stop sharing
Please.
My screen.
Okay, thank you, Stefan. Members, this is an application that I hope most members will view in a positive light because of what it aims to achieve. I would obviously just draw your attention to the fact that there is an existing activity centre there, so this is not introducing something new, and it is, however, for those that have visited the existing centre, it is a significant improvement. The buildings at the existing activity centre are well past their sell-by date, and the site looks very tired and shabby. As you know, Dinton draws a lot of people in to visit it, and I think this rather sort of glares as being very run-down looking. And I think this is an opportunity here to take this forward. Now, as you know, as I always point out, we do not have physical speakers here. But I would just confirm that Hurst Parish Council have not decided to submit an entry under this section. We have no objectors who've decided to submit something under this section, and the local member has decided not to submit anything. We do, however, have a submission which you will have already seen from Wokingham Borough Council, who of course are the applicants. So without further ado, I will now go to members, and I will be doing this in reverse order from last time. So I will come to you first, Rochelle.
Okay. I have a few questions. What's going to happen to the existing tenants in that particular place? I realize this may not be a particularly planning thing, but Winnish First Scouts meets there. and the Dinton Rangers have a post there, and also the boat rental people have a place there to pay for the boats. So how is this going to be done when they knock this down? And where are they going to be reserted?
Okay. Stefan, can you help on that, please?
Yes, I can. So in terms of who's using the building, obviously that's up to the council to manage. But the condition in terms of if your question relates to during the construction phase, the condition allows for the retention of the existing building during the construction phase. So they may potentially be accommodated in the existing building. But I don't know about the boat rental, but in the details submitted, it does refer to the use of the building being used for the Winnersh Scouts several nights a week. So assumedly, it's not necessarily a planning issue, but assumedly they would continue to use the new centre. But that's not necessarily a planning issue.
Also, are there any provisions for alternative transport? In other words, so people don't have to drive their cars and do that. For bicycles, there's no bus service anywhere around there, so they can't actually get there. They can walk if they want from Winnersh Station, but it's kind of a long walk. No, wait a second. There is a bus service that comes out to Dinton, the 128 that goes to Twyford. I'm just wondering, what other options do they have to get there?
There is a condition requiring the submission of a travel plan, but Judy, I don't know if you're better placed to comment on this.
Yeah, so we've got a travel plan condition so that sustainable routes to the site can be looked at. The proposal also includes sheltered cycle parking on site and secure staff cycle parking, motorcycle parking, electric vehicle, charging spaces. So, yeah. Okay,
all of which are, of course, an improvement on what is currently available.
Absolutely.
May not be perfect in terms of having a bus service or a cycle route directly to it, but certainly both considered to be improvements. Rochelle, did you have any other points?
No, other than my dog and I walk by it every day.
Okay, thanks very much. Okay, could I now come on to Angus Ross?
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like just very briefly to support your opening comments. I was involved with this site first in the 1990s when the joint Bracknell and Woking Golf Committee ran first golf course. And we were propping up the building then. How it's lasted till 2020, I cannot imagine. But the introduction of the Dinton Activity Centre to replace the golf and the Black Swan Sailing Club has proved a great success, and they do deserve some fit-for-purpose buildings to operate from. It's great for the council, it's great for companies that have days out there, it's great for kids. So I fully support this proposal. The existing buildings aren't beautiful. Some people may say this isn't beautiful, but I think it is functional and I think it will fit in. I'd just like to make two very quick admin points. I think there's an error in that in para 43, we still talk about an elevated walkway to the end book, which I think was deleted. And the update talks about, I think there's paragraph 49 about distances. I think paragraph 49 talks about water bowls.
Yeah, it should read 59. I noticed that as well.
Apologies.
Stefan, could you just comment on the bit about the elevated walkway?
Yes, so that shouldn't be in there. That has been removed from the scheme.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, now come on to Malcolm Richards.
Yes, it's obviously going to be an improvement. It's a better facilities, upgraded, to be more popular. So I am in favour of that. Just 2 or 3 quick points. One, is a shame that, especially if it's going to be more popular, more people going there, it's a shame they've reduced some of the parking spaces, because obviously people, if they can't park there, they do have a tendency to go out and park where they can, and that's not a great idea. But it's not enough to refuse this.
Malcolm, could you just hang on a minute? I'm afraid I don't understand your comment. There are 66 parking spaces currently. and they're proposed to be 86. How is that a
Well, I've got mine. It's going down to 57. Am I looking at the wrong page? 67 was going down to 57. I thought I was still in there somewhere.
Here you are. I'm looking on page 70 of the agenda, and it has the summary information about the activity centre. It clearly states existing.
Well, different page where it said it was going down by 10. So if it's a bigger number, then I'm happy with that question. If you're sure that's the case.
Did you have another point?
Yes, the other one, it says it's going to have various training facilities, which is quite good, more people going there. But as it's training and therefore sort of educational, and it's a new one, I'd ask, will there be any sprinklers in the training rooms at all? It's an educational build and it's new. Will it be in or not?
Stefan, can you confirm whether there'll be sprinklers?
I cannot confirm that, unfortunately. Justin, I don't know if you have anything to say about that.
Yeah, thank you. Really, it comes in at building regulation stage. I know this comes up at committee every now and again for schools, but obviously this isn't a school and is governed by building regulations.
Even though it's educational?
Even though an element of it is educational, it's not a school building.
Okay. The third one is just the question on noise. It says in the various halls it shouldn't exceed, I think, 33 decibels. That's a very low number if they can achieve that. So the question is, what happens if it's exceeded? Somebody can complain. They can't stop the activities, though, can they? It's a very low level of noise, 33 decibels. I'm told the standing in a quiet road near a town is like 40 decibels. So if you've got a crowd of people in there.
So that's what's been recommended by the environmental health officer from outside the building, and it refers to noise emanating from inside the building.
Yeah.
So that's the recommendation that I've had. I'm not an expert on it.
No,
but obviously, if activities were occurring that were contrary to the condition, then we would have the option of taking enforcement action. If needs be.
Right, thank you. So there'd be more parking than I thought. There isn't a sprinkler, and the noise is recommended. Noise level limit is recommended. So it's a good system. I shall be voting for this anyway. Thank you.
Thank you, Malcolm. Andrew Mickelbrook.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'd like to begin by echoing your and Angus's comments about the condition of the current very well used facilities and the vast improvement that this proposal would represent. And I think the proposal also addresses all but one of the areas of potential concern that I had. I understand that much consideration has gone into designing a sustainable building to help that will help to tackle our climate emergency. But I'm not sure that WBC is being ambitious enough. Condition 23 states the new building shall be constructed to meet BREEAM Very Good standard. This would place it in the top 25% of non-domestic buildings. There are two other higher BREEAM standards, excellent and outstanding. As a borough, we want to set excellent and outstanding examples wherever possible in tackling climate emergency. Also, my layperson's understanding of the UK government's common minimum standards in the construction strategy of 2016 is that all new public buildings must aim to achieve an excellent rating on BREEAM or an equivalent standard. And in light of these considerations, I would like to propose that we discuss a change in condition 23 to BREEAM Excellent standard. Thank you.
Okay. Do we have an officer view on that? I am aware of the fact, I think we just need to keep in perspective, whilst the authority wants to try and adhere and exceed where possible all environmental standards, that has to be balanced against the fact that country parks and their associated facilities such as these, councils have no obligation whatsoever to provide them. And it will not come as news to you that all local authorities throughout the country, as a result of the last 6 months' recent events, are going to be in a very difficult financial position. And there needs to be a fine balance between what is desirable and what is practically achievable. But I'd be interested to hear the officer's view on whether a higher BREEAM standard could actually be applied.
If Andrew is making that as a proposal, I will second it.
It's not a proposal, it's a question at this stage. So we firstly need to get an answer. So officers, are you able to give us an answer on this point?
So, Simon, yes, just to add to what you've said, there's no requirement as we sit here tonight for it to be excellent or outstanding. So achieving very good is acceptable in policy terms now. So going above the policy requirement needs to have a reason, justification, and if there isn't one, then the condition that we proposed is perfectly reasonable.
Okay. Andrew, would you like to come back?
Yeah, I did say it is my layperson's understanding and reading, of the construction strategy. So I may be totally wrong, but it does surprise me, to hear that. Is it because of the location being in a country park that the excellent requirement doesn't apply in this case?
Thank you. It doesn't apply in our planning policy terms at the moment. So I've been at other authorities where conditions have been proposed that a development should meet halfway between very good and excellent. The difficulty with achieving excellent is that it adds a significant cost to any scheme, and that there's a limited benefit, but a very significant cost. The more sustainable a building is in present building construction terms.
Okay. Andrew, are you happy to accept that statement?
Yeah. I'll let that lie for the moment. Thank you.
Okay. Did you have any other points you wish to make?
No, thank you.
All right. Okay. Thank you. Abdul Lois.
Thank you, Chairman. Andrew has asked some of my questions regarding 23. Can I just ask, does this building would have solar panel at all?
Stefan, are you able to address that?
Solar panels aren't included in the current scheme, no.
Okay, thank you.
Right, Pauline Jorgensen.
Thank you, Chairman. I only have one question, which is sort of related to the noise 33 decibel rating that Malcolm raised. I just wondered, is this building going to be open for commercial hire? And if so, are there any conditions around amplified music? I recognise the 33 decibel limit on the hall, but quite a lot of halls around us, people leave the windows open, and I don't know how close this is, whether it's likely to affect residents, but I'm just wondering if the officers could just expand on that point a bit.
There's nothing in the application to suggest it would be open to hire, and we haven't recommended a condition which would relate to that specifically. I don't know if that's something we can think about.
Well, I think we need to remember that this is a replacement building and building. So
no, there aren't. So
well, if we were to introduce those, that would be restricting the opportunity and capacity for the use of this site. That could well be appropriate if it was a brand new building that was being created in the countryside. But this is a replacement building, and I think we have to take that into consideration.
I think, Chairman, I understand what you're saying, but I think this building is far more attractive for commercial rent than what it's replacing, as you said yourself. I mean, I've been in the bit that's currently there, and I wouldn't expect it to be something that would be open for weddings, parties, funerals, whatever. I'm just wondering again about the constraints on this.
Okay, but I would also just remind you, though, as I said earlier, that local authorities are not obliged to provide such facilities as country parks and this type of facility. Therefore, just as when the countryside service started to be required to stand on its own 2 feet and parking charges were introduced, it does mean, this was some time ago, but this does mean that it means that the continuation of such appreciated facilities are ensured. Whereas I wouldn't want to turn around and say that they couldn't do this and they couldn't do that without actually knowing the consequences.
I understand. That's why I was asking about. I've got no problem with commercial hire at all, because we've got to all pay for these facilities. I was just asking about how close people were and whether there was any consideration of the regular use of amplified music. I know that they have occasional fireworks stuff and things in various places, so it's the regular use, whether it's actually likely to be close enough to residents to have any impact.
So I can answer. Can I answer those questions, Simon? Is that all right? The nearest neighbours are 42 metres away, which is the nearest dwelling. But I think it's worth noting as well that the application is for an activity centre with other ancillary, and the word is ancillary uses. So the expectation would be that the use of the building would not stray too far from the activities which are outlined, essentially.
Okay, right. Thank you. Now, Carl Duran.
Thanks, Chair. I know this site very well. 2 young children spend my life at Dinton pretty much. So yeah, I go past there all the time, going around the lake. So, you know, this is going to be, the building that's there at the moment is 1 floor, and this will be 2, so it's going to be more obvious. But mainly from the lake, and it's quite well screened around it on the other sides. And of course, it's serving the activity area of the lake, so that seems fine. So I kind of support it. Again, Andrew's stolen my question that I had, really, which is about Bream, because I had a quick look at that and was concerned to see that there's 2 levels above us, which I was kind of thinking, well, this is, you know, it's a flagship site for us, really, countryside setting, and you know, with the climate emergency the way it is, I would have thought we'd be aspiring to something better. Very good sounds good. Sounds very good. But on the Bream site, it talks of that as being advanced good practice, but excellent would be best practice, and says that's the top 10% of all buildings. So I think we could get to that, and I recognise it's not a planning issue, but I'm surprised it's not done. I'm even more surprised to find there's no solar panels. I mean, that's insane, really. Again, probably not a planning issue, but there's a part slope roof facing south that would be really useful for that, but no panels on it, which just seems strange to me. I just asked the question. I think that's not a planning thing, and I don't think that's something we can put an informative in about. But if we could do that, that'd be nice.
Carl, I think I don't think we can venture into the Bream because of the quite significant cost implications. But I would be happy to consider whether the panel would agree to an informative, encouraging the council as the applicant to consider the use of PV or solar panels, particularly since the majority of the roof is south facing, as you correctly point out. We can perhaps come back to that when we've heard what everyone else has to say.
Okay, but apart from that, yeah, I'm in favour. It's good.
Thank you. Stephen Conway.
Thank you, Chairman. I don't have any objections to this. In planning terms, there's no reason for us not to approve this. I'm very happy to approve it. I would support the informative you just mentioned about solar panels. I think it's an extremely good idea. So that's all I need to say.
Thank you. Chris Bowring.
I support the application. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, we've now heard from everybody. I don't think there are any matters outstanding other than the issue relating to the informative that was implied by Carl. I would therefore propose that we add an informative to the application, which asks the applicant, Workingham Borough Council, to consider whether it would be feasible to include solar panels or PV panels because of A, the nature of this being the countryside, and B, because we'd like to try and demonstrate as far as possible that we're supporting and acting accordingly. But just to stress to members, this will be an informative advising them that this is our wish, that they would consider it. This is not a condition that makes them have to do it. So,
Simon, sorry, could I just jump in there quickly?
Yep.
I have made a mistake. I apologise. I've just looked at the roof plan, and there are a number of solar panels on there, so that satisfies that issue.
Good news.
In that case, hopefully
Good
everybody.
News, yes.
The trouble with
those informative.
They were incredibly detailed, those drawings. It was actually quite difficult to load some of them.
Yeah,
So,
they were.
without further ado, members, I will just call you out by name. Could you please indicate whether you're prepared to support this planning application with the minor modifications that were listed in the members' update? So firstly, I'll go through the order that we went. Rochelle?
Yes.
Yes. Angus?
Yes, Chairman. What I was, if I could just quickly say, if you had been putting that informative, I was going to ask that we added sprinklers to that, but perhaps we can write about that outside of this meeting.
Okay, thank you.
I agree with Angus about sprinklers.
Okay. So Angus, so that was support, yes? Malcolm
Yes.
Richards?
Yes.
Yes.
I support this.
Andrew?
Yes, I support.
Thank you. Abdul Lloyd?
Yes, I fully support, especially with panel now.
Okay. Carl Duran?
Yes, support.
Thank you. Stephen Conway?
Approve.
Can I get a vote, Chairman?
Sorry, yeah. Pauline Jorgensen?
In favour.
Chris Bowring?
Approve.
Thank you. So that was a unanimous decision. Thank you, members. And we now come on to the next application, which is an application in Sonning, which has a significant number of plans attached to it. So, so thank you for that, Stefan. So we now come on to application 200951, which is a full application related to a matter that was, sorry, reserved matters application that was related to a planning application that was allowed on appeal by the planning inspector. The planning appeal obviously does significantly tie our hands. And I would draw your attention to the fact that we have a number of speaker submissions on this, which I'll detail once Sanjuti has taken us through this application. So Sanjuti, over to you, and I assume you'll be sharing a screen again.
Thank you, Chair. Could you please tell me if you can see the screen?
Sanjuti, you'll need to turn your volume up. Very
Yes,
quiet.
we can.
Can you hear me now?
Much better. Thank you.
Thank you. And you can see my screen as a presentation?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. So the application number is 20951. This application is for the approval of reserved matters pursuant of outline planning consent 1615/29 that was granted planning permission on appeal. The outline permission was for the proposed erection of 13 dwellings with associated highway works, public open space, and landscaping. Details relating to layout, appearance, landscaping, and scale are to be considered in the reserved matters application, and it is presented to committee because it has been called in by Councillor Farmager. So this is the site location plan. The site is located at the junction between Pound Lane and Duffield Road and was formerly part of the golf club, a linear development of residential properties along Pound Lane this way, with a few backland cul-de-sac developments characterize the immediate neighborhood. And this is the aerial photograph of the site and its surrounding. The southwestern and northwestern boundaries of the site are occupied by mature vegetation, which are protected by an area TPO. And as you can see, the rest of the site is free of any trees. And these are the external photos of the site from Pound Lane. As can be seen, the vegetation, the mature trees currently obscure any views into the site from the road. And these are the photos from the site looking into neighboring properties. That's 101A and that's the Sonning Golf Club clubhouse. So the two immediate neighboring properties. So the outline scheme that was approved on appeal was for access only, and all other aspects, including the layout, were to be considered at reserved matter stage. Notwithstanding, Two layout options were included in the outline approval as illustrative master plans. So as can be seen, these were the two options. These plans indicated kind of like a central open space and introvert design, which would be surrounded by 8 market dwellings and a group of 5 affordable units. This current scheme follows this introvert cul-de-sac layout with the central public open space. So that's the current scheme. So as you can see, this is the site layout with 8 detached houses with the same central village green. The affordable housing, 5 units, are moved to this area now. All detached units are 5 bedrooms with an extra room in the loft space. And affordable units are a mix of 2 and 3 bed units. 3 bed units are for social rent and 2 bed units are for shared ownership. Now, this is the comparison between street scenes for the outline and reserved matters application, looking towards the northern or the rear boundary. So the outline application didn't include any detailed design, but kind of indicative heights of the dwellings. So as can be seen, the scale of the proposal hasn't really increased significantly to consider the reserved matters application to be materially different from the outline. So in the outline, all 5 dwellings were 10.2 meters high, whereas the reserve matters proposes 2 houses of 10.5 and then the other 2 10 meters. So it's not significantly different. And these are the street scenes looking towards east, that is the Sonning Golf Club's clubhouse. This is the parking layout plan. So the proposed level of parking includes 27 allocated and 13 unallocated spaces, which comply with the WBC standards. Chair wanted to know if it exceeds. It doesn't. It exactly meets the standards. Additionally, adequate cycle parking is provided and electric car charging points are indicated in the plan. And this is the proposed landscape plan. One TPO tree would have to be removed to allow the new access, and some small trees here will be replanted to allow for this garage. However, 25 new trees will be planted all over the site, and 16 new specimen trees or large shrubs will be added. So all other existing trees and shrubs will be retained with some shrub clearance and replanting towards this edge. Overall, it is considered that the site would retain its current verdant character after the development. And for members' update, so the recommendation has been altered. The wording for the recommendation A has been altered to state that the legal agreement would secure planning obligations instead of mentioning various components. Also, the list of approved plans has been added to the update. So it is recommended that the committee authorizes the head of development management to grant planning permission on completion of legal agreement and subject to conditions within the officer report and members update. So thank you.
Okay. 2 minutes. Right. Right. Thank you, Sanjuti. Members, just one important thing I just think we need to get clarification on, because we heard the reference to removal of a TPO'd tree. Can you confirm, Sanjuti, that as the planning inspector was making his decision based upon access only, that it's the planning inspector is the person who has agreed the tree can be removed, because presumably that facilitates the access that he's approved. Is that correct?
The planning inspector approved the access. That's true. But I'm not sure if he had the full picture at that point of time, because looking back at the arboricultural report submitted with the appeal, it didn't include the removal of a tree. Even the report submitted with this application too doesn't mention the removal of a tree. However, the applicant's own design and access statement talks about removal of a TPO tree. So I believe the design and access statement, and looking at the site views, when I went to the site, I had a feeling that one of the TPO trees would have to be removed.
Okay. Chairman, sorry, in granting planning permission, inevitably, sorry, Chairman, it's Justin. In granting planning permission, the inevitable result of the inspector's decision is that TPO trees are going to be affected and they have to be removed.
Yeah, and could we just confirm, Sanjuti, how many new trees were being planted?
25 new trees and 16 additional specimen trees, which are, I consider them as large shrubs, not really trees, but there's 25 trees and 16 large shrubs.
Thank you very much. Okay, members, you, as I said at the start of this presentation, we need to be very aware of the constraints under which we are operating here. 13 houses, the principle of 13 houses was agreed. 13 houses is what is being proposed on the site. A couple of the houses are 30 centimetres taller than the indicative plans submitted with the original, but a number of the other houses are lower than those submitted with the initial plan. You'll be aware from the drawings that we've seen, the photos, that the site is quite well contained and constrained by trees, particularly along the southwest and the northwest and southwest boundaries. The other thing I just need to confirm is that obviously, as normal, people are invited to normally speak at the planning committee. They're unable to do so at the moment, and they're allowed to make submissions. And you would have already seen that there is a submission submitted by Sonning Parish Council raising some objections. That there is a resident, Mr. Etherington, I think it is, who has also submitted an objection. The applicant, Chris Rees, on behalf of Alfred Holmes, has submitted something in support, and ward member Councillor Firminger has also raised reservations and objected to this. So against that background, we will get into the detail of the application, and we'll be going back round the other way. So I'll come firstly to Chris Barry. Chris.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You said more or less what I was going to say, but I'll just give you my take on it. The outline application was for access only, but nevertheless, having spoken to officers, I understand that the layout which was proposed is material, although of course that's nothing to do with access, and with the inspector's comments that the 13 new dwellings, including the affordable provision, would make an important contribution to the supply of housing, helping to meet the limited shortfall. To refuse this application, we would have to show that there was a considerable difference between the layout proposed in this application and the indicative layout which the inspector approved. I don't believe there is, so at present I'm inclined to approve the application. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Stephen Conway.
Thank you, Chairman. As Chris has said, and you said before him, we are very constrained on what we can do with this. The principle of development has been established by the appeal inspector's decision, and furthermore, the access issue really I think we can put to bed entirely, because if I read this correctly, we've already approved a full application for access. So that really isn't something we should be thinking about tonight. I think Chris is correct. The fundamental issue is whether there is any real difference between what's being proposed now and what was presented at the appeal as an indicative scheme in terms of placement and relationships with surrounding dwellings. Now, there is one significant change. The block of affordable housing, which was going to be located on the boundary with 101A, Pound Lane, is now relocated to the front of the site. The consequence of that is that there's a rather unfortunate relationship between the garage on plot 3 and 101A. But however unfortunate that relationship is, and it does, as far as I can see, comply with our requirements on distance. So I don't think we have a ground for believing that this constitutes a reason for refusal. So my sense is that our hands are very largely tied. On the one issue they're not tied on, I don't think we have a case that we can make with any degree of confidence about a change in the layout bringing about a material harm. So I'm similarly minded with Chris at the moment to think that this is something we're going to have to approve, whether we like it or not.
Thank you, Stephen. Now I've come to Carl Duran.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I've got a few questions. In the I got this obviously today or yesterday. In the applicant's public submission, they state that the houses are tenure blind. That's after referring to both the open market properties and the affordable housing properties. I'm just interested to know what that's referring to, what they mean by that. I know what tenure blind means, but I was assuming certainly the affordable houses were. There's a paragraph in the report that they've already been set as 3 social rent and 2 shared ownership. So I just want to know whether that's what they meant by that. And in the appeal decision, there's a couple of paras relating to both the applicant and it refers to the Highway Authority, which I assume is WBC, to be constructing off-site footways, pedestrian access and junction improvements. And I just want to know whether those have been done. I've got another question, but we'll try those 2 first.
Yep, fine. Okay. Sanjuti or whoever, could you please comment on this reference to the affordable dwellings being tenure blind?
Unfortunately, I don't have the answer to that question. I'm not sure if Justin would be able to help here.
Yeah, I assume it means as far as the applicant's concerned, because we know what the offer is. So our housing have accepted it.
I presume it's not so much our housing have accepted it. I assume our housing have specified what they want.
Yes, yes, that's right.
Because I mean, we try and ensure that affordable housing is presented as to reflect the current demand in terms of number of bedrooms, or for example. Okay. And Carl's second point.
Yes, so the off-site works are currently we are considering under a separate S278 highways agreement. So probably Mary would know more about it, but we are pursuing a legal agreement outside of the S106. So the S106 have got some highway components, and we have S278 as well for this off-site footways and all these works.
Yeah, so just an update on that. So I spoke to the 278 engineer earlier, and the technical approval for the works is going through at the moment, and there's a draft legal agreement in process, and the developers applied for the Section 171 license for the works on the highway, so that should all be coming quite soon.
Okay, thank you, Judy. Carl, I think you had another point?
Yes, to say thanks for that. It's on its way, that's good. In the appeal decision, also, paragraph 38, if anyone wants to look at it, the inspector refers to the unilateral undertaking, which makes provision for 5 of the dwellings to be affordable, and that I am satisfied the undertaking is necessary to make the development acceptable and is directly related to development and reasonably related in scale and kind to the development. I have taken it into account in my decision. So my question is, are these affordable properties reasonably related in scale and kind to the rest of the development?
The affordable housing requirements, sorry,
it's a slightly different meaning. It means in terms of the planning obligation rather than in terms of the physical built form of the development.
Sorry, really? Okay, that's very surprising. That seems to be a different language. Perhaps I need to learn it.
The inspector's referring about the tests for a planning obligation. So when he's saying related in scale and kind, he's referring to the scale and kind of the contribution rather than the scale and kind of the physical building.
Okay.
Because of course the inspector didn't know the scale of the physical building when he was making his decision.
Fair enough. A few just comments I'll make. I recognise that the principle of development on this was already established by the previous appeal. Certainly, the access was. I think it's clear that the reason this site is going ahead is because this council failed to satisfy the planning inspectorate that there was a 5-year housing land supply. I mean, nearly half of the appeal decision text is on that subject alone. So I think we made a mistake there. And I wholly agree with those objecting on grounds of road safety.
Hang on, Carl.
Sure.
We have to distinguish between making a mistake and not being and not being able to prove something. If our land supply at the time was 4.95 years, it can't be referred to as a mistake. It's a matter of fact. So I think you just need to be a little bit cautious about the way you describe that.
Yeah, poor wording. But not good on our part then, shall I say. I wholly agree with those objecting on grounds of road safety. I mean, the access has already been agreed, so we're not in a position where we could propose refusal on that basis. But I just find it hard to understand how that access was got through. I think it's unsafe, and I think there was a reasonable alternative within the applicant's power to deliver.
But as you say, Carl, we're dealing with the inspector's decision, so it's
absolutely
not concerned.
I accept that. That's the point I wanted to make. And while I should be happy with 40% affordable, that's kind of my personal minimum on every site. So I feel neutral about it here, and I am unhappy about the massive disparity in size between these homes and the executive mansions, which are effectively 6 bedrooms around them. We're supposed to be building contiguous communities, not first-class homes and the cheap seats. So I think we should be doing that better. But I agree with what most people have said. I don't think there's a reason we can refuse this.
Okay, thank you, Carl. Pauline Jorgensen.
Thank you, Chairman. I've just got one question for the officers. I've never, maybe it's just me, I've never come across a bonus room before. I'm just wondering why they're described as bonus rooms rather than 6-bedroom houses, which is what they look like, and what difference that makes to both the local residents, any constraints they're under in planning terms, or anything else.
I don't know, Justin, would you like, Justin or Sanjuti?
I think it's just developer phraseology. I think it's up to whoever purchases the property to decide what they want to use it for, whether it be a bedroom, a playroom, a library, or whatever it may be, music room.
So it doesn't change the requirements in terms of building control or planning or anything else to what they do with that.
No, it doesn't stop you in the same way as you could use your living room as a dining room and vice versa.
It's just fluff. Okay, thank you.
I would say, Pauline, that I've seen the term bonus room used on plans for the last 10 or 15 years. It's not that unusual. As Justin says, it's to really give people the flexibility as to how they want to use that space.
We've got the flexibility anyway. It doesn't matter what you call it.
Correct. So they could just simply call it room, I guess. Okay.
Well, with all the others, yeah.
Do you have other points, Pauline?
No, that's it. Thank you. I think we're completely constrained in what we can do here. I'm surprised it's only however many inches, centimetres, whatever, higher than the original one. It doesn't look like that on the plans, but if that's the case, we've got nowhere to go.
Okay, thank you. Abdul Lois. Hello, Abdul. Can you join us?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I can see our hands are so tight in these applications. However, can I just have a clarification on page 121 regarding rare private amenity? Some gardens are 13 meters and some of them are 10. All of them are not same. Is there any room that we could, Sanjuti could explain? The depth of the gardens is 11-meter plots, except plot 13, which has garden depth approximately 10. So 11 is the minimum requirement, is it? Am I right?
Yes, Borough Design Guide suggests we have 11 meters of garden depth. The plot 13 is a bit constrained because of the TPO trees and also the depth there. But this garden is wider than the remaining. So overall, this is actually in terms of area-wise, it's got more area than 10 to 12. So I think on balance, this is acceptable. Does it make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, is this the TP?
So in essence, because it may be slightly shorter than the guideline, but it's significantly wider than the others. So the net effect is the area of the garden is larger than the others.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Okay, right. Andrew Mickelbrook.
Yes, thank you. The principle of 13 houses has been agreed, and it also seems to me that the indicative layout that was approved by the inspector is very similar to what we have before us. But my concern is that the density of any development has many implications and is one of the concerns raised by some residents. I'd like more information, firstly, about how the density in this application compares to that in the appeal that was upheld by the planning inspector. I see, for example, the previous application was for 1.5-storey dwellings. This application includes 2.5-storey dwellings. There's a reference on page 115 to this giving a more bulky appearance. This is also likely to have implications for the number of people living on the site. In this application, I calculated 53 bedrooms, not including the bonus rooms. If we add those, that's potentially 61 bedrooms. How does this compare with the number in the appeal that was upheld? And then very closely linked to this development would potentially add quite significantly to the number of local residents. I do not see any reference in the document pack to potential impact on local services, including schools and GP services. Is that a material planning consideration? And if so, can officers please advise on the capacity of nearby services to cope with an increase in the population of this size? Thank you.
Okay. Just before we come to that, to take Andrew's last point, any residential development, regardless of scale, will put impact on local services and facilities, which is precisely why we have one of the most expensive for developers, that is, Section 106 or community infrastructure levy schemes in the country. So indirectly, by adding additional houses, this also means that the developer contributions increase, which is how the council funds all the necessary services such as schools and libraries and highways and so on. So could we look at the density point that Andrew mentioned, please, Sanjuti? I note that the current scheme is before us is showing a density of 16.25. I think his question was, do we know what the density of the previous scheme was that we refused but was allowed on appeal, the indicative?
Yes, it was the same because the number of dwellings hasn't changed. So the density is number of dwellings per hectare. It was 13.
Yes, just to be clear, the density does not relate to the height of the building.
No, it's just the number of dwellings per hectare. So it's the same. It hasn't changed. And for the scale of the dwellings, there was no plans, the detailed plans submitted with the outline because it was for access only. So I couldn't say how many bedrooms were approved at that time because it wasn't considered by the inspector. As far as the total number of bedrooms now proposed, the highways have calculated the parking requirements based on the number of habitable rooms. We don't calculate number of bedrooms, but as per how many habitable rooms each dwelling would have. And highways officer are happy that we have the parking provision meets our standards, so there is no objection to that. And for the height, the indicative, the parish council has suggested that the outline scheme had 1.5 story, but I don't think that's exactly represents the kind of dwelling the inspector considered, because if you remember the comparative street scenes I have shown, the heights of the buildings were 10.2 meters, which effectively is a 2.5 story dwelling. You can fit a loft, a bedroom in the loft with that kind of roof height. So most of the houses we are considering now are less than 10.2. So I think the scale hasn't significantly increased. But as I have mentioned, we have about 300 square meters of extra plot coverage. because of a bit of additional footprint, and the highways now need to meet the standards. So the roads are wider than what the inspector considered. So we have 300 square meters of extra plot coverage.
Okay, thank you. Andrew, does that address your questions?
Yes, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Now come on to Malcolm Richards.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. My question is about the parking things. I think I heard a bit of an answer then, but I need to ask it. I've got down here that the with the 8 houses and the 5 affordables, I've got 53 bedrooms, and it says there's 40 spaces, 27 allocated and 13 allocated. Does that 40 include the garages, or the garages, if you like, a bonus on top? The garages are part of the 40, are they?
Yes, they are.
Okay, right. So when you do the calculation on the parking standards, is it based on the number of bedrooms or what they believe to be the human occupancy of the house? What's the basis for the parking spaces?
I can answer that if you want.
Use bedrooms.
Sorry, so it's based on the number of habitable rooms in the house. So that includes kitchens, living rooms, studies, bedrooms, basically anything that you could fit a bed in. It doesn't include. Say again. And the bonus room. Well, the bonus room certainly. It wouldn't include things like walk-in wardrobe or something that's purely for storage purposes. It also includes utility rooms, so they're quite robust, really.
Well, that's what I was getting at, because if you count 53 bedrooms, those are traditional bedrooms labelled as bedrooms, and I wondered whether the bonus rooms, if they were being used as bedrooms, would actually increase the parking requirement. You say it doesn't as such, because it's already taken into account in a different way.
That's correct.
That's correct, Malcolm. And as St. Duty mentioned at the start of this, I did ask whether the number of parking spaces meets or exceeds our parking standards. It meets it. It doesn't exceed it. But of course, we can't. Providing it meets it, it meets it. That's an issue we just have to accept.
Right. And on the allocated and the unallocated parking, is that policed in any way, or is it just a free for all, the 13 unallocated ones? Is there any plan to control those, or is there any obvious way they're managed?
I have included a condition for parking management plan, so to kind of have better understanding of how these unallocated spaces be used. So that's condition 8, is a parking management plan.
Right, so that ought to resolve itself, but it's only just about enough. Yes, that's it. That's the only question I got, because I think our hands are tied on this, and I just wanted the answer on the parking. Thank you.
Right, thank you, Malcolm. Angus Ross.
Thank you, Chairman. I think even taking the points that the local member listed on were really all covered by the inspector, and there's no differences which are significant enough for us to refuse this. Just got one slight point on what we were discussing about parking a couple of minutes ago. My understanding, or my memory, which may be wrong, on the design guide was that we acknowledged that the garages were only likely to be half used, or half the garages in any place would be used for parking. So was that taken into account in calculating the number of parking spaces, or is it done in a different way?
Judy?
Yes, it is taken into account. So basically we have a spreadsheet that you put in the habitable rooms, the tenure of the dwelling, whether it's a flat or a house, how many garages are included, and they basically do treat the garage like half of a parking space, and then the developer has to provide another half unallocated space elsewhere. So it's all kind of number crunched in that one spreadsheet that everything goes into.
Thank you for that confirmation. Nothing further.
Okay, thank you, Angus. And finally, Rochelle.
I was wondering about photovoltaics on the roofs and whether they're all going to meet the new housing standards to have better things for climate change. So are they all going to be electric boilers, things like this?
Okay, Judy?
I don't think that's really a planning issue at this stage. I cannot confirm,
It's a climate change issue. We all live on the planet.
It is, but it's not something, whilst it's something we may support, we can't apply our preferred standards unless they're backed up by national or local planning law. Justin,
I was just wondering if they were going to put it on anyways. That would be the right thing to do, especially on the affordable homes, because they're the ones who are going to have the most problems making their ends meet.
Rochelle, they haven't indicated that they intend to, and there's no requirement to make them to.
We again, Rochelle, possibly a possible way forward here is that we could ask for an informative.
Yes, I would like that.
I would suggest an informative that draws the developers' attention to the fact that we are trying to, as Wokingham Borough, be an early adopter in terms of issues relating to the environment and climate change, and that we would encourage them. That's all we can do. We would encourage them to consider appropriate heating and ventilation technology to minimise use of natural resources or something along those lines.
Minimise carbon output.
Yeah. Okay. But as I say, we could only do that as an informative.
Well, that would be good. At least you're doing something.
Yep. Okay. All right. Did you have any other points you wanted to raise?
No, that's all. Everybody else has covered most of the other points.
Okay. Members, would you broadly support an informative that encourages the developer, although we can't compel them to, encourages the developer to incorporate appropriate to minimise the impact of these new houses?
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, that's good. In that case, I think we've covered all the other points on this application. And you've seen the members' update and the minor changes referred to in there. And on that basis, I'm going to take this straight to the vote on the assumption that we are including the informative that I've already discussed. So I'm just going through quickly in the members, the order that we went through. Could you just confirm whether you support or otherwise? Chris Bowring?
Approve.
Stephen Conway?
Approve.
Carl Duran?
I'm going to abstain.
Okay, thank you. Pauline Jorgensen? Thank you. Abdul Lloyd? Abdul Lloyd?
Approved.
Thank you. Andrew Mickelbrook?
Approve.
Okay, Malcolm Richards?
Approved.
Angus Ross?
Approve.
And Rochelle Shepherd-Dubay?
Approve.
Okay, and I'm adding my approval to that. So that means 9 members supported this. And Carl, were you abstention, weren't you? Thank you. Okay, so that application 200951 is approved. So now we come on to the last application, 201143. Now, I'm going to go over to, sorry, do you want to wait? People turn their microphones off, please. Thank you, that's better. I'm going to hand over to the Vice Chairman for this item for 2 reasons. I've listed this application. I'm not happy with it. I'm conscious that other members who wish to comment on applications are not able to do so in person. They have to submit something in writing, which is why, members, I have submitted something briefly in writing and will not take an active part in this consideration of this application, but I will remain as part of the meeting because there's other bits to cover afterwards. And also in case, sorry, Callum? Sorry, sounded like an interruption. And also so that I can answer any questions if anybody has any. And the other thing I'd like to draw your attention to is that the Parish Council, Finchhamshire Parish Council, has raised objections to this. And although I'm not part of the planning committee of the Parish Council, I am the chairman of the Parish Council. So on that basis, I will not take part in this consideration of this item. So Chris, if I could hand straight over to you, I will be on mute.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this is planning application 201143, land adjacent to 166 9 Mile Ride in Finchamstead. The planning officer is Graham Vaughan, so it's over to you, Graham, for your presentation, please.
Yep, thank you. I'll just load the presentation. Can everybody see that?
Not yet.
No.
It's food display.
I can see it.
Yeah, no.
Oh, 143, yeah. I think he's left the room so that he doesn't participate.
I noticed my clock stopped, which is a bit worrying, and I haven't got the presentation up.
It should
I
be
think you've got a
showing.
problem, Chris. It's here.
Okay.
Can you hear us? Because if you can hear us, the
I can hear you and I can see Graham, but I can't see presentation yet. Can you see me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, we can see you and see the presentation.
Why doesn't the officer do the presentation and then?
Yeah, carry on, Graham. I can hear.
Yeah. Okay. So the site is located to the south of 9 Mile Ride, behind the initial row of residential properties. It is mostly bordered by these properties, the dwellings at the Dittons and 166 9 Mile Ride. In policy terms, the site is within countryside. However, the use of 4 gypsy and traveller pitches is well established. These photos show some of the existing caravans on the site and the existing hard standing, and you can also see vegetation to the boundary. There's some additional caravans and a building used for storage purposes also on the site on the bottom right. The proposal is for the addition of 4 pitches to an existing 4-pitch caravan park for gypsy and travellers. Each pitch would consist of a static and tourer caravan and landscaping to the boundary. Parking would be provided on the hard standing around the site rather than in each pitch. As set out in the officer report, the council can demonstrate a 5-year supply of pitches. However, the scheme would help boost the supply of pitches in the future and allow for greater flexibility should the council need to defend a less satisfactory application for pitches. Indeed, the intensification of the site to allow for 4 additional pitches would accord with policy aspects in terms of the location of pitches in relation to other development. Whilst the site is in designated countryside, it should be noted that the established use is for 4 pitches and this is given greater weight. For clarity, it was confirmed by the applicant that the occupants meet the definition of gypsy and traveller status. As a result of the single-storey nature of caravans and the separation distances to neighbouring properties, no harmful impact in terms of overlooking, overbearing or a loss of light would occur. While some noise increase may occur through greater occupation of the site, no concerns are being raised by environmental health and the site is clearly established already. Furthermore, following updated information, no concerns are raised in terms of highways, including access to the additional pitches. This has been assessed and is considered appropriate for the level of use proposed. Further information would be sought in terms of proposed landscaping and the existing trees through conditions. The scheme is considered acceptable in ecology and environmental health concerns, and a legal agreement regarding SPA mitigation is being progressed. There are no updates to report in the members' update. Therefore, subject to the signing of the legal agreement and the conditions set out in the report, the application is recommended for approval.
Thank you, Graham. Just to reiterate what Simon said at the beginning in terms of submissions for the objectors, we have Gordon Veach from Finchamstead Parish Council. Simon Weeks is the local member for Finchamstead South. And for supporters, we had a submission from Emily Temple, who's the agent for the applicant. So we now move on to members. And if I remember correctly, we are going in reverse order. So it's to you, Rochelle, first. What do you think?
Okay. I would love this if it was a transit pitch, because one of the problems we have with having inadequate transit pitches to be able to move on some people who are camping out in other places. That would be a great use of this particular 4 places. But overall, we do need enough pitches to make sure we're meeting our standards. Otherwise, people can build more. And I think that's probably going to, since it's already got 4 pitches there, it's probably useful.
Okay, thank you. I don't think there was a question there. Angus Ross.
Thank you, Deputy Chairman. I'm very concerned by this site, and I think the local member has made his position clear here. I believe there is a case for refusal on the grounds of the need of the additional pitches, on the concern about trees, and about the positioning of some of the pitches in relation to the house 6 and 8, the Dittons. But I think our case for refusal would be enormously increased if we were to have a site visit, and therefore I would make a proposal that we defer this item for a site visit.
I would like to second that.
We cannot have site visits at the moment. If an officer would like to confirm that's correct.
And yeah, thank you, Chris. Site visits are tricky in the current climate. We would have to have a discussion perhaps with committee services and with chair or you as vice chair as to how we would conduct them. We don't know when planning committee will be meeting again in face-to-face meetings, or when site visits could take place. So it may be that it's delayed for more than one committee cycle.
Could I make a suggestion, Chris?
Yes. Go ahead.
Could they just go up there with a mobile phone, take pictures of it, mobile, going around and turning around in different directions, and therefore we could actually see what the site looks like without having to go out there?
Yeah, but if we do that, we still have to resolve to defer the application tonight, and there has to be a reason for that. And I don't see how we can defer the application if there's a degree of uncertainty about when we could actually carry out a site visit.
No, a virtual site visit, yes, by one of the officers to go out and take a picture.
Chris,
I understand what you're saying, but I don't. I'm.
Chris, could I support Angus? I've got some concerns over how you access the mobile caravans against static caravans 5, 6, and 7 when you've got hedges that seem to be more or less on top of each other. So I think it would be really helpful to get some advice from the officers, which involves somebody standing in the appropriate places if we can't go there ourselves, to actually see how the site lays out. It's very difficult to tell from this plan whether the amount of space is appropriate, and also the space into number 8 as well.
Okay, so what you're suggesting is we would defer for extra information from the officers to give a better understanding of the distance from the sighting of the new caravans from the Dittons.
And also give some viewers how these, because it's very well saying that the parking is meant to be in one place, but these mobile caravans have to get in and out somehow. And if you look at where static caravan number 8 is, and static caravan number 5 and 6 with their hedge in front of them, I don't see the space in between the hedge by 8 and the hedge by 5 and 6 being sufficient to get your mobile caravan in and out. That's the question I would like to say as well.
Okay, can we get an officer response to that? I'd like to get through all the members first before perhaps we come on to deciding whether to have a site visit or a whatever.
In proposing it, could I just make a suggestion here?
Please.
I understand there may be difficulties about a traditional site visit, but could we understand in terms of timing of this application, at what point will it fall out that the applicant could go to appeal on non-determination?
Well, the expiry date seems to be today. Justin, could you help there, please?
Yes, the expiry date is tomorrow. So if members did have a concern and wanted more information, we would ask the applicant for an extension of time. They could obviously refuse that and could appeal on non-determination on Friday if they wanted to. But if members do want more information, you could suggest deferring until more information, potentially including a site visit or video information, is provided.
Okay.
Chairman.
Yes.
Would you then need a planning?
Wait a minute, Malcolm. Just Callum.
Sorry.
If I could jump in a little bit. I think that there is a point to be made that it is a proposed plan, and the point being that we approve proposed plans all the time, and people are able to move things around a site. A caravan, by definition, is something that can be moved. So I think it's a slight red herring to kind of say that there are hedgerows and caravans already there, and none of that is going to be able to be moved. That is not the case. So they will be able to establish the site as per the proposed plan. And I would also point out that
Sorry, Cap, that means we can't rely on any of the information on this plan, because you can move any of the pieces around. So either those are hedgerows and those are static caravans, or they aren't. And if they're not hedgerows and static caravans and you can put them anywhere you like, the plan's meaningless.
You slightly misunderstand the point being that we are looking at a plan which shows proposed pitches. A caravan can sit anywhere within that pitch, and that's always been the case. That is part of what makes the definition of a caravan. So although yes, the plan indicates one location within that pitch that the caravan could be moved.
So if we were to come to the conclusion that there was an unacceptable proximity to some of the houses in the Dittons, I mean, how could we do that? Would we take the worst possible position, or how could that be? As Pauline says, if there are any indicative positions, how do we calculate what the relationship is to the properties in the Dittons?
You could propose a condition that either there was a landscaping buffer of, say, 2 or 3 meters from the boundary, or that no caravan was sited within X number of meters from the boundary.
I'm also worried about the ability to access. So if you're putting on plans indications that you've got hedgeways, presumably to soften the site, if you can't actually get the caravans in and out with those hedgerows rather, that essentially means that the hedgerows are actually just a drawing rather than a reality.
Okay, I mean, that point's well made, Pauline, but I want to go through the members. Angus, are you making a proposal? Can we just hold that for the moment, and I'll go through the other members first?
Indeed, yes.
Is that all right with you? Malcolm, then, next, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, a caravan pitch, is there a defined size for that in terms of length and width, or is it just an open space, and if it's available you use it? Is it a defined size? And if we've got, for instance, on the original one, 4 caravan pitches plus a lot of open space that's shared, like a massive open garden, if we then double the number of pitches on there, aren't they just taking away the amenity area in there? So all the caravan pitches are then effectively squashed in with not enough amenity, and possibly not enough, because there's meant to be a minimum clearance between each caravan and vehicle, isn't there? Fire brigade and all the other people being able to get in. So I'm not sure how much space it takes. I'm not sure how you work out whether they fit in. I'm not sure whether the gaps between them are right. I would actually quite like, if it's not a proper site visit, some sort of photographs or video of it so we could discuss it. However, the second point of that is, even if someone went down there in 2 days' time and filmed a video for us, we'd have to come back in the next planning committee to look at it before we make a decision. And I thought the time limit was tomorrow. I thought they might allow an extra week for us to film, but it's no use until we look at it at a proper meeting, is it? So lots of questions there.
Malcolm is that they're not fixed positions, but Graham, could you comment on Malcolm's point about separation of caravans? We've got the four old caravans and the 4 new proposed caravans. Presumably, it's not planning law, is it, which separates them for fire reasons, whatever. Is that correct?
That's correct. It's essentially covered by the license that environmental health would grant. So yeah, they would be looking at that. From a planning perspective, the proposed layout, officers consider that to be acceptable in terms of the distance to properties, the distance between caravans, etc. I think it's an aspect where you have to demonstrate harm in planning terms to be able to substantiate a reason for refusal. So you kind of need to think about that. The other point, I do have additional photos that are on a Word document. I can show them if you want. I don't know if that will help or not.
So we keep coming back to this idea that positions are indicative and can be moved around anyway. So it doesn't really prove very much, does it?
Difference. Exactly. So it wouldn't constitute overcrowding then to go from 4 to 8 in the available space, is what we're saying. It doesn't constitute any overcrowding or breach of any space or safety aspect, you're saying?
That's correct, yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah. Okay with that, Mark?
Yes, thank you. Well,
Thank you.
That's right.
Yep. Andrew, please.
Could I actually ask a question, Chris?
Well, I'm going to come. You're next, but one.
Before Andrew.
Why? Can't we go in order, please?
We are.
Andrew,
Okay.
we're going backwards, Pauline. Andrew, please. Are you still there, Andrew? I'll come back to him. Abdul? Unless it's me. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Oh, there you are, Abdul.
Oh, yes, yeah. Looking at the planning history, I'm a bit confused. In order to go further, I need to understand a bit more. If we go to page 169 and we read the one application for variation to condition 3 of appeal decision, planning application reference F2082353 to read to allow no more than 4 residential caravan to be stationed on site at any time. They must have a fairly good reason to put this on. So I'd like to know a bit more, if possible, information about that.
Graham, could you comment?
Information about what exactly? I'm slightly confused in the sense
Page
of
169.
yeah.
124, the very last application there. So I was reading it that the application was for 4 residential. But does the approval restrict? Is the approval restricting the number to 4? I don't quite understand.
Yeah,
it said to allow no more than 4, but that just means at that time, doesn't it? Which is not the same as now.
Yes, it would have restricted it to 4 at that time, and that was what was granted planning permission. They are now applying through a new application to increase the number from 4 to 8, and they are well within their rights to do so. Just as much as you could apply for an additional house on your land, we would assess the planning implications of doing so.
Okay, thank you. Andrew, is Andrew back?
Yes, I am. Yeah.
You are. Good. Have you comments to make, please, Andrew?
Yes, I do. Thank you. Sorry, my internet connection dropped for literally just a minute.
Yeah, I thought probably
I've looked at the planning policy for traveller sites 2015, and I couldn't see any guidance relating to the density of use of sites such as this. There is, however, a requirement to ensure adequate landscaping and play areas for children. Now, in the drawing on page 185, where there appears to be relatively large areas of land on the western side of the site, I note the presence of a relocated stable, suggesting that some of that land may be used for the horses. No parking for visitors is shown, potentially using more of that land. In short, convinced me that the site is large enough to provide for an additional 4 pitches with everything else that this entails. Secondly, on parking, what would be a realistic estimate of the average number of vehicles on site during peak times? The statement on page 176 that, quote, parking will be provided upon the hard standing and not within each individual pitch. Details of parking and turning space would be conditioned, but my question is, where in the drawings provided is there likely to be adequate space to achieve this? Thirdly, neighbours have raised concerns about potential loss of woodland. There's reference to the drawing showing existing trees illustratively. Can officers please confirm, 1, if this means that the precise location of each large tree has not been mapped? Secondly, whether there are currently any large trees, not only trees protected by TPOs, that would be cut down. 3, whether besides the new hedgerows that will be planted well inside the site boundaries, there'll be additional planting on the outer boundaries to the site, sufficient to provide adequate screening for neighbouring residences. And finally, the drawings are, quote, illustrative only. However, they do currently show that the static homes plus ancillary buildings in pictures 5, 6 and 7 in particular would appear to be located within 5 metres of the boundary with the Dittons. Are there regulations regarding an acceptable minimum distance from neighbouring properties? Is it necessary to attach a condition to protect this? Thank you.
Thank you. I think some of that might be tied up with what Angus was earlier proposing. But Graham, did you pick those 4 points up? Can you come back on those, please?
I believe so.
So stable, first of all. Is there?
So, yeah, the stable is labelled as stable on the plan, and we did raise a concern with the agent regarding this. It is purely used for storage purposes. It's not in relation to anything to do with horses, so that is not a concern from our perspective. In terms of the site being able to accommodate the pitches and the ability for children to be able to play, there is an element that each pitch obviously has space around the caravans, and it is in effect like a garden, as you will. And then there is the space around the site in terms of the hard standing. I appreciate that the point being that the parking, etc., will be carried out there, but from officers' point of view, we are satisfied that the site can accommodate 8 pitches without detriment to the amenities of the residential occupiers. I don't know if Judy wants to say anything about the parking and turning specifically or not.
Just that we don't have any specific parking standards for gypsy traveller pitches, but if we treat them as residential dwellings, then we'd be looking at sort of a maximum of 2 allocated spaces per pitch, with a bit of extra for visitor parking. There's quite a lot of hard standing. They've submitted a vehicular swept path plan in terms of how vehicles can turn on the site. There's just quite a lot of room there really to put the parking that they need, so we haven't got any issues with it.
Okay, thank you. Is that okay, Andrew?
Yeah, okay, I accept those answers. There's also the questions about the trees.
I think there's a TPO on the whole application site. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
So we can't lose trees.
Effectively, no. Certainly right to say that the submitted information does show it indicatively. There was a slight concern raised by the tree and landscape officer with regard to 1 tree. But overall, they were satisfied that this information could be dealt with by a condition route protection area of trees on the site. It's considered that the location of the caravans could be altered within their pitches to accommodate for this. So again, officers were satisfied that there wouldn't be harm in this respect.
Okay, so there is a condition for this tree that you're concerned about, is there?
Yes, so just bring up the...
That's condition 4.
Yep, you got there before me. Yes, so condition 4, it would require them to submit a arboricultural method statement, and that's where we would consider the root protection area, etc., of trees and the impact of the development.
Okay. I think, Andrew, you're raising the question of the distance from the Dittons, which has been raised by other members, and I think that may be part of what Angus was proposing, which needs more discussion. But can I just finish? Unless you got any other questions, can I just run through the other members, pick up to see whether there are any other specific points that we need to look at the moment? Is that okay? Andrew, is that okay?
Yes, thank you. Yep.
Okay, thank you very much. We did Abdul. So, Pauline, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I think I'm very confused about what I've heard. I've heard that there is a requirement for parking plans and for landscaping around this site. And I've seen a plan in front of me which has got hedges and things, which fundamentally do not work in terms of access. And then on the other hand, I've heard the officers tell me that these things can go anywhere anyway. So therefore, what we're looking at is something which is just an indicative layout. And the layout could be anything. It could be all crowded in one corner. It wouldn't make any difference. And I don't really understand how we could possibly approve something where what we're being asked to approve is an indicative layout with indicative hedges that probably indicatively won't appear. So could somebody explain to me what exactly we're being asked to approve here?
Just explain what you mean, hedges in terms of, what do you mean access?
Well,
the access road is
no,
already there, isn't it?
If you look at it in between 5 and 8 and 6 and 8, you've got 2 hedges and a very narrow gap. The little orange bits in front of these 5, 6 and 7 are mobile device caravans, and we've got a stable. So if you're going to take vehicles in and out to move those mobile caravans and to move something from the stable, I don't see how they can get through that gap in between the 8 and the hedge in front of 5 and 6.
Right, okay. I'm not sure. Graham, can you help there?
Yeah, so what we are assessing is whether or not the site could accommodate 8 pitches when there are currently 4 on the site. The point about it being indicative is that a caravan is not fixed to the ground, and that is part of the definition of a caravan. So within the pitch, the caravan could be moved around. But if you were to approve this tonight, you would be saying that this plan gives you 8 pitches in these locations. Within that pitch, a caravan could be put anywhere. If you wanted to do so, you could have a condition that starts stating that a caravan must be X number of meters from a boundary, etc. The point I made earlier about that this is a proposed plan is that they will essentially put in pitches 5, 6 and 7, and there shouldn't be an issue with where number 8 is. Afterwards, the gap between the pitches 5, 6 and 8, it scales at 2.8 meters, which is sufficient to get a car through. And we're also talking about a very small amount of traffic, really, in terms of 2 pitches. So again, I think as you've heard from Judy, officers are not concerned in terms of highways regarding that point.
Sorry, just to clarify that, is that those green indicative hedges in front of the potential site for the mobile caravan actually just a figment of somebody's imagination. To put them in, they wouldn't be able to get the vehicles in.
Sorry, I didn't quite catch all of that. There was a bit of background noise.
Sorry. No, Pauline, they're all showing, you might not be able to see it at that sort of scale, but they're all showing access into each individual pitch.
So how do you get through that gap in between the hedge in front of 8 and the hedge in front of 5 and 6 to get your mobile caravan in front of 7?
I think the gap between the fences is 3.9 meters. I'm not quite sure about the accuracy of the landscaping. I mean, it's little green circles on the plan at the moment. I'm not quite sure, Graham, what species it might be or how much it's actually going to intrude into that gap. But, 3.9 meters would certainly be adequate.
Is fine, but that's not what it looks like in the plan.
Yeah, because of the landscaping.
Yeah, exactly. So my conclusion from that is that landscaping isn't going to happen.
The position of the landscaping internally rather than around the site, that is fixed, is it?
It's on the plan, but it appears not.
The position of the caravans isn't fixed, but the hedging is fixed. Is that correct?
Yes,
that's correct.
Yeah,
that's correct.
That's correct.
That's
If
fixed.
the position of the landscaping on the inside is fixed, I don't see how you can get your mobile caravan into 7, or at least the little orange blot in front of 7.
I think the officers are advising us.
Permission for a static caravan and a mobile caravan. If you can only get your mobile caravan in without the hedges, that means it isn't really a mobile caravan.
Not sure.
No,
I'm not
you,
sure where the harm is in this.
In highways terms, I think Judy's saying she's satisfied that you could get the tour out and through the gap between 8 and 5 and 6.
You're just telling me the plan's inaccurate.
No, I'm saying highways are saying there is sufficient width between those 2 points.
I think we have to accept the technicalities that the officer, the officer's judgment is in a better position than us to judge.
So you're telling me the gap between the 2 hedges is sufficient, Judy?
Sorry, I had the mute on. So the gap between the fences is 3.9 meters, which is adequate. The landscaping, I'm not entirely sure how representatively that's shown on this plan, but as Justin was saying, they would get the plots in and the fences and put everything in place and the gates into each individual plot, and then obviously the landscape would grow up over time, and they're not going to get to the situation where at that pinch point things are going to get so overgrown that they can't get their vehicles through. I mean, I think that's just something that they would keep under control at that particular pinch point.
I mean, if it's inaccurate and it's not going to be, the hedging is not going to be put in exactly as described, where actually is the harm? What harm is that causing? I don't see any harm there. And it's just common sense to build where at an appropriate position, there for privacy and to allow the caravan to get in, I think.
What I'm after, Chris, is to make sure that when this is built, it is as per plan, and that it's as per plan, and that the mobile caravans can easily get in the position they're in. Otherwise, they're not mobile caravans.
Well, you've been assured by the officer that they can.
I'm happy to do these assurance.
Would it help
Can I
if...
ask the second half of my question?
Justice?
Sorry, it's Graham.
Graham, sorry.
No, it's fine. Would it help if the condition regarding landscaping was slightly amended to say that at the point of pitch 8, 5 and 6 that there is no landscaping provided right at that point, and therefore the 3.9 metres that we've been discussing is definitely achievable?
Yes, I think that would help. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Chair, can I clarify one of my earlier questions?
Is it possible,
yeah, let me just check. We're having an amendment to it.
Possible for some of us who've not actually been able to speak to get.
Stephen, I'm going to come to you. I'm going to come to you very shortly. That would be an amendment to a condition, so we need to remember that. As indeed we move down to Carl, unless you have any more questions. Sorry to Carl and Stephen, but that happened on the earlier application when we were going forwards. Any other points to make, Pauline?
No, I'm satisfied with that. Thank you, Chris.
Thanks, Carl.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, no need for apologies. I kind of just answered most of my questions. Yeah, I strongly support Angus's suggestion of a visit, but obviously there might be difficulties in doing so, and there might be time pressure on this application. But I think it's a great idea, and I think we'd definitely be doing that if it wasn't for the pandemic. I kind of accept there's no specific planning reason preventing an increase in pitches on this site. I mean, the local plan update proposes an extra 4 pitches of this site already. I mean, listening, I before we started speaking, I had concerns about the layout, and it seems like the people who actually know the site are confused by it, and I'm no less confused after hearing what we've been going on tonight. The report says that cars will be parked separately from the pitches, and that doesn't seem likely to happen to me. I mean, people park as near to their property as they can get away with. So if there's space to do it, I think they'll do it. And that's natural. I think anybody would do that. So I would have liked to have seen a layout of the parking and the turning. I mean, I think that diagram has a little bit, but it's not very clear. And I kind of agree with Pauline on that gap. I mean, I say it's been resolved now, but I looked at that and immediately thought exactly as she did. That's how does a car get through there? And the other problem I've got with the layout is I kind of assume the site will be configured to spread the space around the proposed 8 pitches, but it looks like this 4 are just being squeezed in to one area. They seem to have significantly less space than the other pitches. So I was wondering if there's anything we can do to resolve that. I doubt there is. I kind of agree with the parish council that says that that the mobile home should be an acceptable distance, and I think they're a bit too close to the boundary for a site with this space. And I know there's been some talk of a condition on that, which I kind of support, but we've got to be careful about that in terms of if a pitch is right up against the boundary and we condition it to say, for instance, that a caravan cannot be within 3-4 metres of that boundary, all of a sudden the best option for the person in the pitch is to stick the caravan at the far side of it, and now their amenity space is facing the boundary with all the noise and activity that creates. And it might be that neighbours on the boundary would prefer the back of a caravan to be there, where there won't be people around making noise and so on. So we just need to be careful about that and not put ourselves, or rather those residents, in a worse position than they might if this progresses, of course. So I think the only question I had is that anything we can do about the fact these pitches are, well, they appear smaller than the other pitches really, and force the spreading of the space? I'm guessing not.
Graham, please.
The short answer is no.
Yeah,
this is not like a normal planning application for houses, is it?
So to go back to Cole's point, I think he picked up on potentially conditioning that no pitch should be within X meters of the boundary, and I think it's possible to do that, but we need to be clear here what the harm is from having a pitch close to a boundary. I mean, the pitches are separated by legislation at least 6 meters from each other, and if you look at the Dittons on the site plan, there are terraced homes which are attached to each other. So we need to be clear why the Dittons can have terraced houses, but the site needs to have pitches that are significantly separated from the residential houses.
Okay, that seems to be the stumbling block at the moment, so perhaps we can come back to that point generally, because I must come to Stephen Conway.
Thank you very much, Chris, and I'm sorry if I was a bit impatient, but
not at all.
We seem to be getting a bit bogged down.
What, tonight? Yes, a little.
No, I just thought on this particular application.
Okay.
It does strike me, this is in conflict with policy CP11, but of course there are special rules that apply in assessing traveller sites. But as I understand it, 2 of the rules that would apply are that there needs to be the existing level of local provision and the need for sites needs to be assessed, and special personal circumstances would need to be identified. Well, there are no special personal circumstances, I think, have been identified. And when it comes to the demonstrable need, it's pretty clear that we greatly exceed the 5 years worth of pitches. The plots were now actually at more than 9 years supply, so there is no demonstrable need. I understand Graham's point about wanting to put some in the bank for later, but we wouldn't say that if we were talking about the 5-year land supply, would we? We wouldn't say, oh, let's have a 15-year land supply. We would be trying to limit ourselves to what was required and not exceed it. So I do have some scepticism about that. Can I just clarify? I'm feeling I've missed something really important here. On the plan, it designates the proposed static units in brown, and I only see 3. It looks as though the existing caravans are identified in a kind of yellowy beige. There seem to be 5 of those. Can we just clarify which the 4 new ones are? I know there must be 5, 6, and 7. Which is the other one?
Graham, please.
I think that's as a result of using a caravan that's already on the site.
Right.
So there's essentially
it's there, but so it's been double counted in a sense. It's already there, but we're being asked to approve it as a new one. Is that right?
Yeah. Essentially, a pitch will typically comprise of a static and a tourer caravan, but not always. So I think it's just a case of it's currently counted towards one of the 4 pitches, and that particular one is just being reused in terms of creating the new ones.
Okay.
But ultimately, what we are approving is 8, or seeking to approve is 8 pitches.
Okay, thank you for that. I strongly support Angus's proposal for a site visit. I fully understand that there are difficulties at the moment. I don't think we should be necessarily deterred by the fact that the application is due to expire tomorrow and the applicant can go to appeal for non-determination. My reading of this would be that it was in the applicant's interest to wait for this to come to the September committee and be resolved one way or the other there, rather than enter into a long and current circumstances very long wait in the queue for appeals. So I think we we should defer this application in order to gather more information on the layout of the site and the topography and relationships on the site, either through a real site visit, as we always used to understand it, or if necessary, through a virtual site visit conducted by an officer with a camera. So I would support that very strongly. Thank you.
Just on the point where you said there was no need, of course, even if there is no need, and I think members and officers agree there is no need for this in terms of the land supply, we still have to prove harm if we wish to refuse the application. And since there are already 4 caravans there now, it's not straightforward to prove harm for adding another 4. There may be a case for it. Still has to be argued.
I think you could say this actually breaches planning policy because it's in conflict with policy CP11. The draft local plan, which was cited, actually, as the report says, carries relatively little weight. So there is actually a planning reason for refusal, demonstrable harm, but that has to be balanced against this special test for traveller sites. And my argument is that I'm not convinced that this meets the special test for traveller sites. So I think we don't actually have quite the same problem that you're stating, Chris.
Okay, thank you, Stephen. Well argued. I think if I go back
Chris,
to
sorry, Chris, can I just make a point to Stephen's comments?
Of course you can.
As we've accepted that the scheme is contrary to CP11 in terms of countryside, but policy TP10 of the MDD, which relates to traveller sites, sort of anticipates this sort of conflict because it expects traveller sites to be on the edge of settlement or adjoining and just outside settlement, and it accepts that. So that, in fact, if you look at this, settlement boundaries are to the north, the east, and to the south. So it's very much on the edge of settlement. So it accords with TB10, even if there is a technical conflict with CP11. And sorry, and on the other point, I think you'd made it, Chris, that having a supply in terms of pitches or in terms of standard housing doesn't mean that future applications are unacceptable. So if you've built 800 dwellings, it doesn't mean that dwelling number 801 must be refused. It still has to be assessed on its own merits.
Okay, thank you. Perhaps if we go back to Angus, who I think proposed a site visit, if I remember. It seems a long time ago now. Angus, could you just set out your stall again, please?
It was a long time ago.
Sorry, my bad chairmanship.
No. I foresaw this was going to be a tricky one. I think from what I'm hearing from members is that we don't have a good feeling for what the size of this site and the juxtaposition of it with the distance and whatever. How we can achieve that in the conditions we're in is the problem, and Justin has alluded to that. But I still believe that personally I would be unhappy to make a decision either way tonight. And I think we need to better understand the site and get a feeling for it.
Chairman.
Yes, please.
On the site visit, Justin's already mentioned that at the moment we're not doing them, and it will be difficult. We can look into doing a risk assessment. We can do some research as to what our neighbours are doing in terms of site visits, whether they have restarted, and we can sort of probe any guidance as well on that, if that's something that members want us to do.
I'm not sure what we do when you come back and say we can't have a site visit. What's the state of the application then? That's the problem, isn't it? We won't have advanced.
Chairman, we could investigate how we would undertake a site visit or how we could provide additional information that might satisfy members. You know, if we couldn't do a visit, we could do a video walkthrough of the site, for example.
Use a drone?
We haven't got one to hand, Malcolm, but we could then come back having investigated what we can do, or providing additional video information or drone information if we can get it, and then members can make a decision on that, either that they're happy with the information and they can proceed, or that they're unhappy with the information and they make a decision on
Okay,
on that basis.
I think I'd like us to be a bit more specific about exactly what we want. And I think it's the effect on the Dittons residential properties. Now we need to find, well, we need to know, if you're going to have a video, you need to know what the video's got to be about. So I suggest that what we need to understand is what the site looks like from the various, there's 3 properties in the Dittons, which it's suggested may be affected adversely by the sighting of these caravans.
Chris, I think
we need information to enable us to do that. And I know either Justin or Graham suggested we could put more extensive landscaping between the site and those properties to obscure the view, if that was possible. But we'd have to decide that when we came back to committee at the moment. Do members have any particular view on what direction to give the officers about what we'd like to get back from a site visit, which the officers might have to carry out because we as members can't?
I know the officers have said that the sites are all accessible, but I would like to see how the practical layout works out on the ground as well. If they're going to go there, can they actually show us how that's going to work?
Does that make sense, Graham? Justin?
Yeah, I understand what Pauline means.
Yeah, can I just jump in and just what I want to establish is what is the harm in planning terms on the properties at the Dittons? If you can kind of establish that, because otherwise I'm struggling to understand. Are we saying that there's a impact on loss of light or overlooking or something like that? As we all know, a loss of a view is not a material consideration. So what is it exactly that is actually harmful about the location of the pitches in relation to the distance?
Right, a member, please. Who wants to comment, please? I mean, Angus, you're proposing it, Angus.
Well, would it accord with the rules of our design guide in terms of separation?
Precisely.
Yeah, and I think additionally to that, are there any regulations, other regulations, that would apply, to traveller sites like this? I don't know.
Well, a separation distance could be done now by saying that they have to be so far away from the hedge. You wouldn't need a site visit for that.
But I think, Chris, if you made them that far away from the hedge, you probably wouldn't be able to get to them. I think that's the issue. I don't. That's my problem. I can't understand how this actually works on the ground.
My understanding of this is members are concerned about potential for noise and disturbance. So I think we do need to have a kind of sense of. I mean, Carl raised a very good point. If we do condition to move it away from the boundary, potentially we're going to get amenity space being used between the caravan and the boundary, and that might increase the noise. So I think these are things we can only really judge if we go on a site visit.
Yeah.
My preference would strongly be for a real site visit if we could achieve that with social distancing. If that's not possible, then I think we would have to rely on an officer filming the site for us, walking around the site and filming it for us.
Malcolm is trying to speak as well, and he's had his hand up for a while.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Do you want to speak, Malcolm?
Yes, please.
Oh, sorry.
It's more clarification on my previous question. I asked earlier on if there's a definitive site size for a pitch. Is it like 50 square meters or whatever? Is it an actual size, or is it just enough space to get your static caravan, your mobile caravan, and a bit of space as a garden? Is there a definition of what a pitch comprises and its size? And for instance, if you were given, let's say, 50 square meters, does it have to be in a square? Can it be a long straight line, 3 meters times 15 or something? Are there any rules on the size and the layout of your pitch? Because if there's no rules, then they could have all the static caravans on one side and all the mobiles on the other. They can do anything they want. So the indicative design doesn't seem to matter if they can do what they like. So the question is there a size and is there a layout that they have to conform to?
There isn't so much a size in terms of like square meterage, but it's more to do with separation distances between pitches and between caravans, and certainly our borough design guide highlights some of that. it wouldn't be a case of they would be able to put all the caravans on one pitch and that's it. That would therefore make it not a pitch, and therefore it would not be in accordance with the approved plans.
So pitch has to be integral. All your pitches in one chunk. You can't disperse it in bits across the site. Is that right?
As in what they have shown on the plans is what you would typically expect of a pitch.
No, the rules I was saying. Does it have to be an island that's your space with a boundary, or could you put one bit here, one bit there, one bit there? Are you allowed to disperse it, or does it have to be like a little island, your little territory?
Sorry, yeah, they need to be, the pitches need to be demarcated under the good practice guidance. The pitches need to be demarcated, and they all need to be at least 3 meters from the boundary and 6 meters from each other. So there's no maximum, but obviously the minimum is dictated by those requirements plus the maximum size of what a caravan is in planning terms.
Okay, thank you for that.
Okay, so I think we need to, we sort of need, I sense that members want to have some sort of site visit, even if it's only an officer site visit. If we can get a site visit with social distancing, what do we want to see? What's the purpose of the site visit? It's to look at the positioning of the caravans with regard to the properties in the Dittons. Is that correct? Is that what members want?
No, as I said before, I want to understand the actual layout of what they're proposing as well.
Understand the layout means. I mean,
I agree with Pauline.
You've got a plan here which is unworkable. I can't visualise how it can work on the ground.
Officers, is that an acceptable reason for a site visit?
Well, I think they just said they could.
Anything's possible. Is that okay? That would be a social distancing site visit.
Or just a video by the officers.
I understand what Pauline means. I think she needs to be satisfied that the layout that's shown on the plan is workable, and wants details from the site to demonstrate that to her. So I understand what she means.
Is anybody?
It would be a great help, given what Pauline's just said and Justin's just said, if the site could be marked out so we could actually see it.
Yeah, I agree.
Yes.
Yeah. Chalk spray or something would be ideal.
If that makes sense, then that's what we'll have for a virtual, for a social distance site visit. But if we can't do that, then what do we want the officers to do? Presumably to give us
a virtual site visit, and they can mark out these places on the site, and we can take a look at their pictures.
Yeah, we need to see views from the Dittons to the three residences there. Views into the site. Is that acceptable, members?
Yes.
Is that
we don't have a road, then we can do anything. No.
Is that acceptable to you, Angus? It's sort of dual pronged.
Yes. From what I'm hearing from Justin, I think he understands our concerns and can do the best to find the information in one form or another, either by a site visit or by video, or even better if we could get a drone, so that we have that better understanding and feeling of the layout, the interplay with the Dittons, the trees, because although it may not be relevant to this planning application, I'm not sure that all the TPO trees are still there, but just get that feeling for the site, which you don't get on a bare plan.
Okay. Okay, so I will second that proposal that Angus has made for a site visit, and I think I'll go to a vote on that. Can anyone indicate if they wish to vote against that, please? By raising your hand. I can see hands. And I can't see any hands being raised. So I think, Callum, that's approved.
Yes,
so we are deferring this planning application for some sort of a site visit. And that concludes this agenda item. Thank you.
On that.
And
Chris, is there a timescale of any sort?
I don't know. I don't think we need to resolve timescale. And I expect Simon's going to come back now. There he is.
Simon, just as I've got you coming back into the meeting, can you just confirm whether you've actually made a formal declaration of interest for that last item to be noted in the minutes? Is that?
No, I haven't.
Do you wish to?
No.
No. Okay.
No, I stated the reason why I'd listed it and why I was not going to take part in the discussion, because that would give me an advantage over other members who are not on the planning committee who would be unable to speak. I don't think that's a declaration of interest. I have no specific personal interest or knowledge of the applicant or the site.
Okay.
Okay. Right. Thank you, members. That concludes the main part of the planning committee. Could we please, Callum, we could end the recording of the meeting or the public broadcast of the meeting, because we now need to review a couple of other points.
Sorry, Simon. I'm
yes,
sorry.
Mary.
I'm so sorry. I was just listening to what you were saying. I think as well, you said, sorry, I just want to get some wordings from Callum. You said when you said that you didn't want to take part, you said the words "I'm not happy with it." Now, that indicated to us that you kind of felt a bit biased against it.
Which is why I've recused myself from taking part in it.
What, that you felt a little bit biased against it, and therefore you didn't really come with an open mind.
That's why I recused myself.
That's okay. It's not really declaring the interest. It's just sort of ironing out sort of the legal side of why you didn't take part. Thank you very much indeed for clarifying that then.
I wish to play safe.
Sorry, say that again, sorry.
I wish to be safe.
Yeah, well, the decision's safer without you in it. If you've indicated that you're a bit biased, okay, fine. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Thank you, members.
Did you want to discuss the householder, the non-householder appeals in public, Simon?
No, not necessary.
Okay,
this
that's
is
fine.
the planning committee. So if we could end that bit, could you confirm when it's ended?